Ron Hayes, is that not Irish?
It is Irish. Yeah.
How do you not know Flogging Molly?
So you don't even want to know my musical taste. I know Cole doesn't approve.
Really? Now I am intrigued. I want to hear about this musical taste. What is it? What do you got going on over there?
It's not being recorded yet.
Well, we're recording right now, but full disclosure.
I'm a hip hop guy.
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm all over the place.
So Flogging Molly hasn't made an appearance in my iTunes playlist yet.
Okay. How long have you been? Have you always been a hip hop guy?
Well, no, because on the ranch we were only allowed to listen to country.
Ah, that's right. You grew up in Wyoming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I was the breakdancing champ of the Bighorn Basin in 83, 84, 85.
For real. That is amazing.
For real. There were like 4 people.
That is incredible. That is awesome.
I was just the most athletic, so.
That is awesome. I remember my older brother took me and my sister. I lived in Henderson, just outside of, well, now it's all together with Las Vegas. But as a kid, we went to the drive-in movie theater in probably, I don't know, 1982, 1983, when Breakin'.
Would have been 83, I think.
When Breakin' came out.
Yeah.
And we went and saw Breakin' at the drive-in movie theater.
That's when it started. That's when the big boxes of cardboard became something desirable.
Yeah.
You could cut them apart, throw them down on the concrete. No, the dates change every time I tell that story, but it was somewhere in there.
Somewhere in that range, right? I mean, yeah. And that movie was like, when I was just like, that was all new stuff, and we were all just like, that was the coolest. Now I want to like go back and actually watch that.
Especially here, right? Because you didn't see any of that until the movies came out.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah.
So that's my story.
Right on. Well, I had a food trailer business for many years, and we would jam music in there, and I just can't, I'm not one of those guys who can just always listen to the same thing all the time. So we kind of went in phases. And, there's a lot of days in there we're cleaning up, and it was a lot of 90s hip hop. That was April's thing too. Mm-hmm. April's thing was more 90s hip hop. I actually wasn't into hip hop in the 90s. I went through like, I don't know what kind of a phase I went through, but I do have a big appreciation for it now. And there's some stuff that I like. I don't know.
Yeah, some of it's a little too
some of it's
raw,
a little out there. But
yeah.
I've also been in a big Wu-Tang phase for the last 3 years. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Whatever, guys.
We lost Cole there.
I told you he did not approve.
No, I listen to it once in a while. I like Eminem. I listen to some old Tupac. From back in the day, LL Cool J. I've always liked LL Cool J. So, once in a while I listen to hip-hop, but not...
I saw LL Cool J. I was a stagehand in Denver in probably 92 or 91. LL Cool J came to Denver, and I had a job as a stagehand, so we got to set up that concert. He was the headliner on that one, but it was LL Cool J. It was... there's a bunch of other names I could tell you that I know you're going to know. I think Warren G was there. Mm-hmm. There's a few more, and I wish I had them. But anyway, that was my first, hip-hop rap concert, whatever. But
never been to a hip-hop or rap concert.
I didn't buy tickets. I was working it.
The funny thing is I haven't either.
Really?
Ever.
Oh.
No. Mostly because they never had them. There was, I think... Snoop Dogg had the Puff Puff Pass tour, and he did come to Casper, Wyoming, and I didn't make it.
You didn't make it. So my wife made it to, Snoop Dogg came to like Missoula several years ago, and she made it to that. So.
Yep. We had in college, I played football in college out at the University of Sioux Falls in South Dakota, and our initiation as freshmen was you had to get up and sing in front of everybody. And I made fast friends with all the urban crew because I did the football rap. LL Cool J did football in the movie Wildcats.
Okay,
Long time ago.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember it.
I did that for my freshman initiation and never got messed with again. That was
you had street cred from day one. That's so great.
From the mean streets of...
Did you have a signature? Did you have like a signature move? Did you have one thing that you were like, that's kind of my go-to thing that I'm like really good at, and you liked it?
No, not really. Well, yeah, it was called the hand glide, I guess.
What is that? Describe
I
that.
can't even get my elbow there anymore, but you like stick your elbow in the middle of your chest and
Okay.
you're on your hand.
And you're on your hand, right?
And you're spinning on one hand. Yeah.
Yeah. Cole, we'd have never known this.
No, this is something that he doesn't disclose very often. I didn't know about the breakdancing thing till just now, which now is going to open up a whole new world on photo shoots. I can't wait.
You guys are going to be around the campfire, up in the breaks.
These days, there has to be quite a lot of alcohol involved.
Of course.
And I don't let myself get to that point
I
very
hear
often. But
I hear you, but no, I think that's a great story. That's interesting, and that speaks a lot about who you were in Wyoming. So,
yeah,
growing up in Wyoming, then you went into you have a degree in biology.
In biology, yep, from the University of Sioux Falls in South Dakota.
So, what led you from what led you? Obviously you've kind of been trending. We're going to get to wildlife photography here, but how did you go into biology?
So my whole family, my great uncle was the director of the game and fish department. Another great uncle was a biologist. One side of my family was totally in that world and involved in that world and wildlife centric, I guess. The other side of my family, we were ranchers, and that's who I spent most of my time around. But I always had that draw toward the natural world, I guess. And whether it was at the ranch, I was the kid that was down at the creek making traps so I could catch the suckers and the minnows in these traps, and then I'd box them in with rocks, and they'd end up in my grandma's sink on the back porch of the house, and I'd get in trouble. We'd caught leeches all the time and take them up, put them in the sink. She was less proud of that.
I bet. That's great.
But it was just always, we were just outside. We didn't have television. We barely got a radio station.
Wow.
So we were outside, and then...
Kids today can't relate with that at all.
No.
Yeah.
No, it sounds like it's a lot further back in history than it actually was. This was in the 70s, and we just grew up that way.
So I hate to keep going back to this, but under those conditions, how did you get exposed to hip hop? Like, how did that strike a chord with you? Like,
I think it was just the movies.
Yeah. Okay.
To be honest with me, or with you, and it was something different.
Yeah, I went home trying to like pop and everything. Right. I didn't know what we were going to go see. That movie Breakin' was the coolest thing ever. And now, like, if you watch it now, it's got to be just hilarious, whatever. But yeah, but as a kid, we were all just. We went home, and we were trying to spin somehow on the ground, and I was trying. We were all, I was pretty little, but yeah, same thing. I didn't. Yeah. Anyway, I get it.
I think that just resonated, and I like the music.
Yeah.
And again, it was just something different.
Yeah.
I was fourth generation on both sides of my family in Wyoming, and one side was poor and lived in the canyon near Thermopolis in Wind River Canyon. They were allowed to homestead in there because my great-grandfather was adopted into the Shoshone tribe. And so they were allowed to live on reservation land. And now they've carved out a small niche of land in there that actually the original house from the family is still there. The original two houses. And then further up the canyon now, it's basically a small subdivision.
Wow.
In the canyon, and most of them are family, or were family members.
Tell me, I'm fascinated with all this. We're big history buffs here, but so how did your great-grandfather get adopted into the Shoshone tribe?
He used to hunt and fish and trap, and he was
What was his name? Do you remember?
White, Jim Bob White. James White.
Okay.
So he did a lot. He wasn't from my understanding, he wasn't a very nice person. Kind of a alcoholic at times when he was home, and he didn't stay home often. He had 10 kids.
Wow.
So we have a big family there on that side. But he was a riverman, and I think that's how he ended up getting adopted into the tribe, is because he could get up and down the river. He'd go to town, pack 300-pound sacks of flour back up to the mouth of the canyon, and then he would canoe them back up to the middle of the canyon. And he could get furs, and he trapped with them up in the Dinwoody, which is up near DuBois, Wyoming. He was involved in building the Old Faithful Lodge in Yellowstone.
Yeah.
He was a taxidermist, so he still has a full mount horse he built his forms with paper mache.
Okay.
And he still has a full mount horse in Wall Drug in South Dakota. He has a full mount buffalo in the
I bet you I've been there. I bet you I've seen that horse.
I guarantee you, yeah. In the capital, the state of Wyoming. He was just all over the place.
That's incredible.
And did a lot. So that's how I think just being a riverman is what led him to be adopted, because he did a lot for the
Probably
people.
Bringing a lot of trade goods in or out.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then the other side of the family, I think, we don't know for sure, but my great-great-grandfather showed up with a bunch of horses out of Nevada in Thermopolis, Wyoming. And no record of how he came to own those horses.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he was a little bit of a renegade too. And then they had, the Wild Bunch, Butch Cassidy and Sundance, and Harvey Logan, which was, I think he's the only one that was a little bit maybe bloodthirsty in that crew.
Yeah.
He got shot, and he would come and trade horses with my great-grandfather.
Wow.
And he got shot by a Pinkerton detective. They hid him in a root cellar initially on the ranch, and then eventually the story goes that they took him and hid him on an island closer to town, because they had to go blindfold this doctor, bring him out. So they took him closer to town and were on the island. And there's a historian from Worland, Wyoming, that found a letter from a federal judge in Riverton. And the letter said that, because they always thought that Harvey Logan just got better and went away. Well, they found his brother's grave in Montana. And so now they had DNA. But he found this letter that said that there was somebody making headstones for the Hayes family cemetery. And he told the guy that if he had any material left, any concrete left, to pour it in this low spot in the Hayes family cemetery, because there was a famous outlaw buried there. And so they wanted to exhume, so they had to get permission from all the family members to go into the family cemetery, even though we didn't own the ranch anymore.
Yeah.
And I never heard the result, but they had DNA to compare it to.
Really?
So they were going to go test it and see if Harvey Logan actually died.
Did they get the permission? Did they ever get the...
Everybody but one gave permission, and then I never heard what the results were.
Huh, that's incredible. That would be super interesting to find out what happened. It would be.
Because the family story was that he got better and rode off into the sunset somewhere.
But he probably
But there's a good possibility that he died.
He just stayed there.
Mm-hmm.
And
yep.
Are you saying that he died then from those wounds?
Yeah.
Instead of living underground there?
It was... Yeah, I think he probably died then after the shot or shooting incident.
So you would think that if he died, that it would be less threatening for that information to come out, that's where he...
I don't know why anyone would not give him permission to, because it wasn't a family grave, it was...
Or maybe people just were like, we didn't want to... maybe they didn't want it getting out that they were harboring a fugitive or something.
No, they
didn't care?
It was pretty well known.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just nobody knew where he was. But
that's incredible.
So your great grandfather knew Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid?
No,
didn't know.
They knew Harvey Logan.
They knew Harvey Logan
and his brother. Yeah.
So 6 degrees of separation.
So this is all. Did you tell him about this?
No.
We had a whole conversation last night about the theory. Are you heard of that theory?
have.
Yeah. Okay, great. So we had a whole discussion about that in here last night, and we were. So along those lines, it's like, yeah, wow, you're like only this far removed from whoever. So that's interesting. That's fascinating.
Yeah, Butch Cassidy. So the hole in the wall was just over the mountain from where the ranch was.
So you're our connection to Logan now. I'm pumped.
Right.
I'll always remember that.
Yeah. So, but they never did meet.
Okay, so you were
Butch
saying
Cassidy.
the hole in wall was just across.
The hideout was
Yes.
just over the mountain. So it was an easy ride from where they typically hung out
Wow.
to where we were. And then Butch Cassidy did spend time in Riverton,
Really?
which is only 50 miles away, but he didn't come through the ranch.
I'm sure somebody's taking a metal detector over there, right? Over there.
There's so much history over there. There's a lot of battles and
Yeah. I mean,
tons.
I'm getting to the point now. I don't have a metal detector, but I'm getting to the point where I want one on like a gun rack at the back window, like just with me all the time now. That's how I'm starting to get. You just don't know where, I'm not even making fun. I've got to get one. That was another problem why I got to bed late last night, is I got into a whole thing on YouTube of these guys over in the Ardennes with metal detectors going through American foxholes.
Yeah.
And just digging up all kinds of stuff. And I should have been going to bed, getting some rest, right?
No.
And I'm glued to that, watching them dig up and find buttons from uniforms and shell casings from a 75 millimeter,
Artillery.
yeah. And just all kinds of stuff. And then they got into these other holes that were German, and they found porcelain plates and bowls, and just with all of the markings on the back, and like, why is there porcelain plates with swastikas in the branding on the back? Anyway, so it was fascinating. I love all that stuff. So I don't know, like that's got to be, I don't know, not to make this all about me here all of a sudden, but I like that. There's things that now I like to just keep with me. Like I always have a pair of binoculars with me. I always got my camera with me. I probably have a gun in my vehicle. I have probably a few those types of things. I'm kind of getting to the point where I'm like, I want to have a metal detector all the time. So if I'm out someplace,
I think it's just fun. And most times, it's not all that historical, the things that you find, but once in a while you find a nugget.
yeah. And you're going to find a lot of Bud Light caps, but it's that dee, and you get that little hit in your, your system. It's the search. It's so
on near that other side of my mom's side of the family, they had some land up on the mountain. We used to go up there every once in a while, and there was a spot it was like a giant rock outcropping, but what you couldn't see anywhere around it was that once you get inside there, the rock just makes this big mound, and then inside there it's completely flat, and it used to be a camp. Wow. Because you couldn't see it from any direction.
Wow.
Unless there was smoke coming out. And so we would go in there as a family, and you'd take mesh grate and sift, and found pottery and all kinds of artifacts, and
wow,
just about everything you could find. My grandmother was the best arrowhead hunter I've ever even heard of. We were driving across this creek bed one time, and she just screamed, "Stop, stop," jumps out and comes out with this grooved rock. And how you would even see it, I have no idea, but comes out with this grooved rock that was a war club head.
Wow.
Obviously it had something wrapped around it.
Sorry, guys.
Cole's getting emotional.
Cole? It's going to be all right.
Oh, man. I don't know what that was all about.
I was about to get emotional too, but...
Yeah. No, I had a tickle in my throat, and I couldn't get rid of it.
I've been threatening to install a cough switch. And I only have one, so I'm like, I was going to give it to the guest, but it's probably going to Cole until I can get some more.
I didn't mean to.
No, I know. I'm just kidding. That's awesome. And you know what's funny about that is, like, I guess if that's where your mind frame is, like, it's kind of like when you start shopping for a car, that's the car you see all the time, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I wonder if that's just because, that's what's on her mind, or that's to be able to pick that out like that, where somebody else is just going to be oblivious, like that's not natural.
Yeah. For me, it's, it's wildlife. I guess. For her, it was arrowheads, and she took a whole set of golf clubs and cut the heads off of them, and then soldered spoons to the end of the golf clubs, and she would just go flip rocks over to see if they were.
That's great. That's pretty smart.
Yeah, and that was our tools when we were kids. You get a long-handled spoon.
Very long-handled spoon.
Hand me the 9-iron.
Yeah, this can
need to flip some rocks.
Yeah. Wow.
It was fun. I had a great childhood. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds awesome. So then you went and got a degree in biology. I totally get that background. And then you went into law enforcement, correct?
Yeah. So I worked for the Game and Fish for 4 years. And at that time, you would work on a contract basis. So you'd have a 6-month contract doing habitat biology. You'd have a 6-month contract or 3-month contract doing fisheries. You'd have a 1-year contract doing lake surveys or something like that. So you just bounced around, and my wife at the time and I moved 12 times in 4 years.
Okay.
Chasing these contracts around.
Yeah.
And then she got pregnant with our oldest daughter.
Was that wearing on you, that moving?
It wasn't wearing on me. It was definitely wearing on her.
Right.
Because for me, it was a means to an end.
Yeah.
But when we got pregnant with our oldest daughter, it was fine to move all that time when we could throw everything we owned in a horse trailer and just go to the next place. When we had a daughter, it was different.
Yeah.
And so I settled in Douglas, Wyoming, and went to work for the sheriff's department there.
Okay.
And then, off and on for 17 years, worked for different agencies.
Wow. That's a whole nother 3 episodes we could dig into that. Because
that's kind of how Cole and I got to know each other a little bit. It just had a little bit of a common background. And so, obviously we had the photography in common as well.
So did you actually retire from there, or did you just say, like, how did you make that switch then to going into photography? And was it and how did you make that decision to go into that and go so full-time, go hard?
Well, I'm not full-time anymore, but no, it was more of I worked for a very political entity in the Wyoming Law Enforcement Academy. You work directly for the Attorney General.
Okay.
And everybody's a climber, and
you just got tired of that. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, certain circumstances led to I need to be done.
Yeah. So were you doing obviously during that time? Like, how did you find that passion in photography? Was it after that, or was it during all of that?
No, it was during all of that. I would say probably found that passion when I worked for the Game and Fish, but I didn't own a camera. I just had a video camera.
Okay.
And I would just go video. It was an old High 8. It was not a high-end camera.
Yeah.
It was a Sony High 8 camera.
I had one.
And I would just video everything, because how else is anybody going to believe all these stories you tell?
Yeah.
These things that you were able to see. And so that started it. And then I borrowed a camera, film camera from my father-in-law when we were in Glacier, and went up to the top of the hill, took probably 200 images on a 36 exposure roll, and when I got back down to the parking lot, realized that the tabs didn't catch, so the film never advanced.
Ooh.
And so I took off and went back up the hill, the mountain, it wasn't a hill, up the Hidden Lake Trail, and took a bunch more pictures of the goats. Nobody went with me because they didn't want to do it twice. And then I got on that same trip, ended up getting video of some wolves. No, sorry, that was a different trip. Getting video of some wolves, but it was all while I was setting up, trying to get the reflection of this lake in a mountain in the lake, and I looked through the viewfinder, and there's a wolf right in the middle of my viewfinder. First time I'd ever seen one.
Wow.
And this was up in Alberta.
I saw my first wolf with Cole.
Did you?
Yeah. This spring. This spring.
Yeah.
When we went to the park.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is nothing like it. No matter how you feel about a wolf, there's nothing like seeing the first one.
No.
That's for sure. But I just kind of started to fall in love with it. And I'll be honest with you, I recently got divorced, and my wife gave me some old albums back. And I was looking at those old pictures, and I was terrible. But I loved it. And so I started to make some progress, did some mentoring with a couple different guys, and I kind of started to move toward the professional end of things in 2013. Probably started.
And were you still in law enforcement at that time?
I was.
Were you finding?
No, sorry. I was just out of law enforcement.
Okay.
I had just left the academy.
Like, were you finding, though, that was photography or wildlife photography, was that like, that had to be, this is probably a dumb question, but it had to be kind of a release from what you were experiencing at work. Like, to get out there
definitely.
and just be like, I don't got to deal with all of this. That, I know the law enforcement guys, I mean, I can't imagine doing that job. Like, that, I can't do that job. I would get too bugged about a lot of things, or I'd get too, it's got to be just an emotionally taxing job.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm always thinking about that, gosh, this has to be a very good release. I'm always projecting onto Cole. I'm like, he's got to be just like, this is just such a release for him. Anyway, so that's why I wonder that.
It is. And that, that was one of the first conversations that Cole and I had. That's how he got into it.
Yeah.
And just talking about how getting away from people, getting into nature is kind of, what would you say, therapy in its own.
Yeah.
And with my background, of course, that's where I always wanted to be anyway. So it just kind of became that escape. It gave me the ability to recover, maybe handle a little bit more, because I had a place I could go.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Happy Gilmore.
Yeah.
It's
your
my happy
place.
place, right?
Yeah.
No, it totally is. I mean, I'm like we've talked before, I still have that paperwork on my desk about going to a multiple traumatic incident therapist, and I haven't never been. But I mean, I can go out, and even if I don't hit the shutter on my camera, I can go out and spend 45 minutes to an hour with a deer, even if it's a mule deer doe. And I mean, I'm 100% better than when I showed up.
Yeah.
And I don't know I don't know if I would be in law enforcement. I'm on year 17. I don't know if I'd still be there if I hadn't
found that outlet.
Because I'm a huge hunter. I mean, we all know that. I'm a huge hunter. I love hunting, bow hunting, rifle hunting, whatever. But it still has to do with, and I'm not saying cops deal with killing all the time. Most cops never pull their trigger in their career, but it's that mindset of taking a life, right?
Yeah.
And even that wasn't the escape and the recharge that I would need. The being out in the nature part, yeah, but I'm there my goal is to take this life, this animal, so I can go home and consume it and provide, nutrition for me, myself, and my family. But with the photography part of it, you get all that, and you're not having to take that life. You're celebrating that life in a different way. I think in hunting, you're celebrating that life of that animal too, but in photography, it's a different celebration of that life.
And I think like you say, most guys don't ever get into that situation where they have to pull a trigger. But I guess the thing I think about is the conflict all the time. Mm-hmm. There's so much conflict in a guy in a law enforcement officer's, so much domestic issues or whatever it is. It's usually, most of the time, not that I know everything, but it's usually in conflict with somebody over something, even if it's tense words.
Mm-hmm.
That's taxing. I can't, like, if I have tense words with somebody, that's a major event in my week,
Mm-hmm.
And that's like, you're having to deal with that, even if it's just a traffic stop where somebody's being kind of crappy with you, or somebody doesn't, somebody's leaving the bar late, and whatever those issues may be. I don't know that I could separate very well from that. I would be bugged when I go home. I would be stressed out all the time of like, okay, when I pull this guy over who's obviously, being reckless or doing whatever he's doing, I'm going to walk up to that window and this guy's going to just be a jerk. That would stress me out. And I would be that guy who's like taking it at home, and I'd be one of those other statistics probably who's like raging alcoholic or who's like, whatever the other things are. But that's why I'm saying I can see how this kind of a healthy outlet would be so important to let go of that stuff.
It becomes a mindset too. So I went into banking after I left law enforcement and never would have had any inkling that that's where I would have ended up.
Wow.
And it was just, I was teaching a hunter safety class, and this guy's son was in the class. He was autistic, and I just was able to work through some things with him, get him to understand some concepts, and then in just dealing with other parents that were in the room with their kids as well, he came up and offered me a job based strictly on how I dealt with people. And so it was one of the first weeks I was there. This person would come in and get in arguments with him all the time. And I had him in my office one day. He was at lunch. Had him in my office. He came back, just let me continue the conversation. Let the guy vent. We talked. By the time he left, we were shaking hands and laughing. And he said, how did you do that? I said, listen, that was a good day. And we're, in the place I've come from, that was a good day. So you just kind of get used to working through those things and processing them. And I know Cole's done the same thing, but the conflict is always there, but your ability to resolve the conflict, it definitely matures, I guess, or evolves. And I think that's, as long as you're able to get through that, leave with a smile. And most times you could. There were times where you couldn't.
Yeah.
It's going to be a different resolution, but I think it teaches you a lot, and it teaches you to deal with a lot. And it definitely takes a certain personality type. You got to let things roll off your back a little bit. But I tend to take things pretty light. Yeah.
Yeah, so. I do too. And I think we have, you and I in our type of law enforcement, because we're in rural areas, I think it's harder for us, and we have to be even better at letting stuff roll off our back and being able to not jump the gun, pun not intended, so fast we have to work on fixing the conflicts, because usually we're the only one there. We don't have 3, 4, 5, 6 guys backing us up, and you get 35, 40 seconds to try to resolve the conflict, and then you go hands-on, you put the guy in handcuffs, you go to jail, you go to the next one. We don't have that luxury. I mean, I might be out with a guy for 2 hours because I'm the only one there, and we've got to figure out a way to resolve this situation, because if I go hands-on and something goes wrong, I don't have anybody there to back me up. So it's really learning how to talk to people, how to read people, how to read the situation. And I know guys, I go to conferences and stuff with cops that are in the big city, cops and stuff like that, and they're like, how do you even function when you're out at 2 a.m. with a person that's agitated or whatever it is, or maybe suicidal or whatever the situation is, and you're there by yourself? I'm like, I don't know any different. So that's how I operate. Now, if I had 5 or 6 guys behind me, I wouldn't know what to do, because that's not where I work at. And so learning how to talk to people has become super, super important, especially as a rural police officer, rural law enforcement officer. And I think it's one of the greatest benefits to being a rural cop, is that you learn how to engage with people from every walk of life, every culture, every issue that you can possibly think of that humans have, and learn how to resolve that. And most of the time it's pretty peaceful resolution. And I'm super thankful for that, because I'm not a huge people person generally, but being in law enforcement has really changed that, and being able to help me have those kind of conversations with people, I guess.
Do you think also, is it a factor being in a small town area or rural area, that you have to deal with these people at this moment that's probably a negative experience, but then you've also got to go like pick out produce next to them possibly at the store, because there's one store, and so you got to deal with people. But then I'm not sure if guys who are in larger cities and they work a certain area, I don't know. They just like, okay, they deal with somebody, but there's probably a lot less of a likelihood that they also got to go use the same store with them all the time and possibly go to church with them, or
not just buy next to them. You buy from them a lot of times.
Yeah.
So
yeah, right. So that's got to be a factor as well. Is like you can't just gruffly deal with a situation with somebody and then be like, I'll never see that jerk again, because you've also got to do conflict resolution, but you also have to live in the community with that person and see them probably at that sport, games, a high school thing or something, because maybe your kids are at the same thing. So that's got to be a factor, huh?
For sure. Yeah. And with the Game and Fish, one of the first things, when you're training with them is, okay, understand everybody that you deal with is armed. You make that assumption as a sheriff's deputy. You make the assumption that everybody you're dealing with is armed, but in Game and Fish world, you know that they are.
Yeah.
Because most of the time you're dealing with them during the hunting season. So you learn to de-escalate verbally a lot quicker.
I have a nephew who's been a police officer in Las Vegas now for, gosh, he just seemed like my younger nephew, and now it's amazing how many years have gone by. Like, he's probably been there now for 17 years. Just a great guy, great kid. Always has just a laugh and everything else. And he, early on in his career, he had bought a home in a nice neighborhood, and he bought his first house, and he was single, and anyway, so he was at work, and this is Las Vegas, so he's at work, and there's a call that there was this kind of a funeral going on for a gang shooting victim, and some car drove up and shot into the crowd, shot a bunch more people. They then took off, and they killed people. Anyway, the call goes out. He's rushing there. All these cop cars are rushing there, and they're all heading there. And then he sees the car go by that's gone out that they're looking for, and he flips around, but nobody else saw it in that group of cars that were all heading that direction. And so he's the first one to get back up onto I-15, and he gets them stopped, and they shut down all of I-15 right at the Spaghetti Bowl there in Vegas. If you're familiar with that area, it's just like right in the middle of everything. They shut it all down, and he's the guy to start talking them all out of the vehicle, all these guys, and more cops are all showing up. There's helicopters. It's a big old scene, right? And he gets his car stopped, and they get all these guys they go through the routine. They get all these guys arrested. And anyway, so it was a big deal, in his career, and a big moment and whatever at work. And he goes home, and about 2 days later, he sees these same guys drive by, and he's like, they pull in the driveway like 3 houses down, and they live in the same neighborhood. They were like 3 houses down from him, and it was the several of the guys that had been in that car were already out of jail, and they're in his neighborhood, and he was just like, ugh, And so anyway, in that big city, all of a sudden he's like, these guys were violent criminals, and I don't know what the rest of that story was. All of a sudden he was just like, oh, that's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Anyway, so here I say that probably in those bigger cities, you don't have to run into the people like that, but he certainly did in that situation. Anyway, side story. But I think in a smaller town, you probably have to face that a lot more often.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yep. And
Wow.
that's where I think your personal reputation and how you deal with people,
Mm-hmm.
the word spreads pretty quickly.
Yeah, it does.
And it helps sometimes, at times.
Yeah.
It either helps or hurts. So.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Before I knew Cole very well, yeah. People talk about different officers and who's a good dude, who's a good guy.
What do they say about Cole?
I've never heard anything negative about Cole.
You wouldn't say it on air anyway.
I wouldn't. But
No.
no, I've never heard anything. No, I've never heard anything negative about Cole. I've only heard people just say that Cole and Clay are both just good guys. I've never, I'm usually not with the people though that would probably be having problems or have,
Yeah.
I'm not around the ones who are pissed off that they got dealt with or something. I have heard of the officers in town though. I was telling Cole about a guy who was known for, parking at a certain place and picking off workers, out-of-state workers who their plates were out of state and they're working here, and he was just known for that. And I told him about a comment that guy made to me one time, and he wasn't ever a jerk to me, but I just like that guy. To some people had a reputation. I don't know. I think in every small town, people start to label certain ones, and I think a lot of times it's unfairly because people like to play the victim.
Yeah.
And
agreed.
And so I look at it. Anytime I hear that, I immediately kind of go there of like,
yeah,
But anyway, small town cops. I mean, if I was going to be a cop, I would have to be a small town guy. I would be the guy trying to have coffee with people in the morning, and I don't know. I'd be a Barney Fife. Yeah. Probably wouldn't be for me.
Yeah, and it's even more now because how my photography journey has progressed. I mean, my pictures are all over the county. They're all over the state. There's been billboards with my pictures on them, so people know.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool now when I go to places and they're like, "Oh, you're that cop that's a photographer."
Yeah.
And so I mean, it's kind of cool to go to places, and that's how people
know you
versus me than just the guy in town who's a cop.
Right.
So I mean, it's kind of cool, and
yeah.
Now that I'm the school resource officer, it's even more like I'm even more out in the public. I mean, being a night shift supervisor and doing all the drug stuff for all these years was amazing. But now that I'm in the schools and I get to work on a normal-ish 8 to 5, 7 to 5-ish type job, and I get to see kids and I talk to the parents, and so it's kind of cool now to have that. I mean, and like Ron said, I mean, I've worked hard to have that decent reputation. I mean, I don't want to be an asshole to everybody.
Right.
And so now after 16 years, 17 years where I'm in that, now I'm, and the sheriff and undersheriff agree, I'm in the spotlight 24 hours a day as a school resource officer. This whole county associates the sheriff's office with me.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that's who sees me all the time, are the parents and the kids.
Right.
And so it's you don't know how your career is going to progress, right? And so the actions and the decisions that I've made in the past 16 years of my career, have led to where I have that decent reputation in year 17, and it's paid dividends for what I do now. And
I would think it's got to be, I've never thought about this, but I would think it's got to be a very important decision about who gets assigned to go and do that. Because if you've got some officers who that guy's just probably viewed as not as like a people person or a person who, you are dealing with the kids and you're dealing with all, like you are the face of some things. And so I would think that's got to be an important decision about putting a guy over there who can represent well. And because I don't imagine just because you're a police officer doesn't mean you're going to be a good this or a good that.
Well, and the whole world of school resource officers changed. It used to be your school resource officer was the 20-year vet that didn't want to retire but didn't want to do anything. So you stick him in the school. He's 150 pounds overweight. You can't see his gun. You can't, his gun belt doesn't fit anymore. He looks like he's
checked out.
He's checked out. And, and now, thank God, now the school resource officer is a sought after position. It's an important position. I mean, unfortunately, in the world we live in, it's a necessary position. And like, I wanted to do it. I went to the sheriff and undersheriff and I said, look, for years and years and years, I wanted to be a SWAT guy. I wanted to be the one kicking down doors, and I still do. I still love that part of and the tactical operations and everything. But I wanted that position. I wanted to be that school resource officer. I wanted to, in this stage of my career at 42 years old, I wanted to have a new challenge, and I wanted to see just how far I can take it. And my goal now is to be the best SRO in the state of Montana. I mean, just super easy goals, right?
Yeah.
But I want to be the best SRO in the state of Montana, and I'm working with some other ones right now to start our association for the state so we can get more training and funding and stuff like that. But so it's a good challenge, and like, again, the decisions that I've made the last 16 years and having that decent reputation and working in a small area has led me to be able to thrive in this new position. So
I would argue that position is it's more important than the tactical guy. It's it is become it's not just a checkout position anymore. It's you are making connections with and impressions upon kids that are growing up, and that is to me it's a super important one, because
every other piece of the law enforcement team, or every other cog in the wheel, so to speak, is reactionary. And I think that the SRO position gives you the potential to intercede before people get to that point.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's critical.
Yeah. And I think it's like how you say, well, I used to be all into this, and I think isn't it kind of just interesting though that I view it as we go through seasons in our life. Like the season changed for you. There was a season for that, and now the season is different for you, and that's okay. Like that doesn't mean that once you were that guy, that's just who you are. You always have to be that guy. Right. And this is you find value in this season, or in this what your interests are now. And I don't know. I guess that's how I allow myself now, where I'm like, how do I just redefine myself? It's okay. You don't always have to just be this guy. Like you didn't always just have to be law enforcement guy, or now you're a wildlife photographer, but you don't always just have to be that. You can go with the flow on that. I think some people struggle with that, making those types of changes, or being brave enough to change their identity and things. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think bringing this baby full circle, the season for breakdancing has come and gone. It was pretty short-lived.
I don't know. It got some headlines during the Olympics. It's back out there.
That must have been your favorite event in the Summer Olympics, wasn't it?
In a good way. Negative. I didn't even watch it. It was terrible. The highlights that I saw, it was not what it should have been. But anyway, no, I think you're absolutely right. And it's no different than, Cole was talking about being a hunter. It's no different than going through the stages of hunting. Initially you just want to harvest something, and then you go through the stage of being more of a trophy hunter, and then you go through the stage of being a sportsman. And I think it's that way in life with everything. Initially you just want to conquer.
Yeah.
And then you go through, okay, I want to be the best. I don't want to just learn to do it well. I want to be the best. And then you go through the stage of, hey, I really want to help others.
Yeah.
Learn how to do this and learn how to do it well. And I think that's probably where I am currently.
Now, are you currently doing like workshops and with people? And so tell me, like, how does that all work? How do people do that with you? And what are you trying to impart, or what are you trying to I guess what's your focus in these?
So initially, again, different stages there as well. Initially, you kind of go through this tour stage, where you're just trying to get people to the right location. Cole and I went to Churchill, Manitoba last year, and I know he's talked about it on the podcast. That was kind of a scouting mission to see if we wanted to continue to go up there. The company that we went with wanted to establish whether or not people were going to get good images this different time of the year, during the autumn. And it's just beautiful up there. The tundra turns all kinds of colors.
The colors were amazing.
Yep. So they wanted to see if that was something that photographers would enjoy. So they gave us a pretty good deal. We went up there, had a blast. Then this year it was initially supposed to be a workshop, but everybody that ended up going were fairly seasoned photographers. So there wasn't a lot of instruction necessary.
Yeah.
There was a lot of, answering questions prior to, and that kind of thing, setting expectations realistically. And I think, once we got there was a little bit of coaching on different techniques, or looking at scenarios in different ways. Excuse me. But there wasn't a lot of workshop type. We didn't sit down and do any classroom stuff. It was more in the field,
And
coaching
so
people.
a lot of your workshops they're more like expeditionary type workshops where we're like, hey, we're not just hunkered down here, but we're going to go here, and you can sign on to come and have this experience and learn these things.
Yeah, but I do workshops at home where, like for grouse.
Okay.
Where I'm literally telling people what to look for, sitting down right next to each other, and it's more of a 2-on-1, 3-on-1 kind of thing.
Yeah.
Not big groups.
Yeah.
Because for grouse you just can't. You have to be pretty careful. So I do that.
How's that experience been dealing with the public? Like versus, what is that? Contrast that.
It's surprisingly frustrating.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, you always think that when photographers come, everybody's going to be like-minded.
Oh, okay.
And so just as a for instance, I went out 3 weeks ahead of these guys showing up, put up photo blinds, staked them down because the winds in Wyoming can be fairly brutal. Staked these blinds down, had everything set up. We were looking right at the lek, right where the sun was going to be coming in. And I get there and pack in with this group of guys at about 3 o'clock in the morning. Because you have to get there in the dark and then let the birds kind of settle back into their activities. So I'm sitting covered up in a ghillie suit in between the two photo blinds. I've got one person in each blind. And I hear these zippers, and I'm trying to get them to, quiet down, let the birds rest. Zippers are going, sliding gear across the sagebrush step, and the birds never come. I can hear the females behind me clucking, but they never come to the lek. And so I get up. I said, well, I think we're done. We've missed that portion of the morning where they're going to be strutting. And I get up and turn around. Both of them are sitting behind the photo blind. They've got their gear in the photo blind, but all the zippers and sliding equipment and all that was taking place was happening outside of the blind. And that's
it's like a
why,
complete lack of situational awareness.
Right. That's why nothing ever came in.
And then are they like, well, why didn't we see anything?
Yeah, they wanted their money back. And
oh man, that would be, I get it. I see what you're saying.
So
frustrating.
It can be frustrating. It can also be very rewarding. I mean, it's no different than what we were just talking about with law enforcement. It can be the most rewarding job in the world, as well as the most frustrating job in the world. But that's the same. But then you contrast that with the group that we just went to Churchill with. Went back kind of same time frame that Cole and I went last year. The group that we just went with, it was very rewarding. Everybody had a great time, and it was, up to that point, almost everybody in the group, that was the highlight of their or one of the highlights of their photographic journey. And just like last year, one of the highlights for everybody was filming the whales, or even just out observing the whales. That you would never think that it would be that impactful, but it seemed to be for everyone this year.
Wow.
It was fun.
I bet.
And last year we had...
Oh man, last year was... that was so cool.
It was a blast.
There's somebody who's like obsessed with marine life in this room to the point to where we're like pulling on his jacket. Can one of us get over there now, please?
I was too busy giggling, having a good time.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Dude,
though,
it was
to
so
be out
cool.
doing that type of stuff, having those types of experiences.
I never imagined
with like-minded people and friends.
Yeah. I never imagined what belugas sounded like ever. But now that I've heard them and I've been in pods with them, I'll never forget that. And it's one of the coolest things in nature that I've ever witnessed. And it was just, there's like life-changing experience or like life moment experiences that are just like, they blow you away. And that was one of them for me. And I mean, I'm not even a big marine. Like, I want to go in a shark tank I want to go in a cage and scuba with great whites. I think that would be one of my top 5, like, holy crap moments in my life. But this was just, it was so cool, to see these beluga whales like accept you into their pod, and they just start talking to you and checking you out. And, you could almost like you could almost feel like they were having a conversation about what was going on. It was just, it's so cool, and something I never imagined going to go shoot polar bears,
Yeah,
So.
and then have that little side bonus.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So are you guys going to be going back up there more often then?
Yeah, we're going to continue to do that. We're going to switch it up. So in 2025, we're going to go later in the season.
Okay.
So it'll be more in the reason the bears congregate in these freshwater river areas, whether it's Seal River or the Churchill River or wherever it's at, is because that water freezes up first.
Okay.
And so they know they can get out on the ice and be hunting earlier than in the open water areas. So the numbers go from last year we saw 7 individual bears, I think.
Mm-hmm.
This year we saw 14 roughly individual bears.
Wow.
So the differences in the numbers are when you go back in that different time of year, there might be 100 individual bears in the same vicinity. So you get a lot more interaction. So you get bears that are kind of play fighting. You get bears that are really fighting. But you get them on the snow where you would more think of polar bears being.
Yeah.
It's just a totally different opportunity, different type of year. They're more active because it's colder. When we're up there, they used to call it walking hibernation. They've kind of disproven that, but they're very lethargic most of the time. You might find bears that sleep in the same spot for 3 days.
Wow.
As long as they don't get disturbed by another bear.
Which is
later
funny
in
that
the season is different.
they're so lethargic, but yet that doesn't mean they're weak.
Yeah,
You
for sure.
Yeah, how they can just laze around or whatever and just look like they're totally disengaged, but how just awesomely powerful when they want to engage.
We change it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then we're going to alternate it from that point forward. So.
And so are you then going to be taking groups of people and people are going to be able to go and sign up and that okay.
Yep.
That's awesome.
So we'll definitely do that. And then looking at some different areas. We're looking at some Alaska potential, and I think we'll probably continue to do that. Next year we're going to do fishing bears.
Fishing bears.
Yeah, so brown bears.
Okay.
That are
okay,
along the coast and eating the salmon and that kind of thing. And we're camping with them. So we'll be out there for a 5-day trip in a camp with the bears. Got electric fence around camp. And
wow, that's Cole was telling me a little bit about that. I'm like, what an experience.
Yeah. And it's close proximity. So most of the time with wildlife you're shooting with anywhere from a 400 to 600 millimeter lens. With those guys, probably a 1 to 300 lens would be ideal.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible because they're that close.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's pretty wild.
And they just could care less about you. They're focused on the salmon.
Yeah, as long as there's some salmon, let's keep the salmon coming.
Yeah.
So they.
And you go up there in a group. You never go up there by yourself. That would be different. But in groups, it's pretty safe.
In this wildlife photography journey of yours, is there anything that you, I guess, after you've been in there for a while, is there anything that you've changed about your thought about it, or what are there any kind of preconceived notions you had about things, or your expectations that have changed, like something that when you first went into it you thought it was going to be more like this, but what you're getting out of it is more this?
Well, I think for me it was a little bit different in that my desire was just to spend time with the animals and observe and learn, and the photography is a fantastic side benefit of that. So I think that part of it is probably the same. I think my feelings about people have probably changed a little bit. I think we're our own worst enemy. I think that we definitely, a friend of mine, Michael Morrow, he always used to say we're loving places to death.
Oh yeah.
Because you hammer in these national parks, they just get hammered, and the wildlife get harassed all the time. And so we definitely can love places to death, and so that's changed a little bit. I was always one that wasn't afraid to go sit in a group of 300 people waiting for this animal to do something, and now I try to be by myself or separate from the crowd as much as possible. So that's a little bit different. But as far as spending the time observing the animals and just kind of learning what makes them tick and learning what certain postures mean and that kind of thing, I don't think that's any different. I've always been a student, and my focus is always to learn something new every day.
Yeah.
And I've said that several times, but I don't think in that aspect, I don't think anything's changed. I think the biggest things that have changed is my perception of groups of people and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Have you found that there's like a certain type of gear that you didn't think was going to be important to you, but now that's one of the most important things to you? Is there something that people overlook when they're getting into this?
No, I think we're probably a lot like cops in that aspect. Is everybody's a gearhead. You always want the next thing that's going to make your life easier or make you more efficient and more effective. And I think probably, if anything, I've pared back, gone the other way, and tried to be. You can definitely overwhelm yourself with options.
Yeah.
And I think trying to simplify your kit. I now shoot with a zoom probably 90% of the time, instead of having the long fixed glass, just because it gives you more flexibility, more options.
Yeah.
But as far as I am down to one tripod, I use a video tripod, then I can switch back and forth. It's light, carbon fiber, if I use a tripod at all. But I think more than anything, I've probably tried to simplify as far as the gear goes.
Yeah. I know. I always feel like I get overwhelmed. I love all new tech. I love new gear, all that kind of stuff. But every now and then I feel like I have to stop and and look at it like, am I using what I have to its potential, to its full whatever, before I just get excited that the new one came out? Like, am I even, am I using this stuff to its max, to justify even going there? Because we can all get caught up in whatever the next new thing is. But yeah, and I see that so many people now, it seems like people are going back to film. And do you ever mess with film, or do you?
I did, and that honestly, that first experience with film, where the film didn't catch the tab, that. First of all, it did two things. It made me respect the heck out of everybody that did this with film in the past.
Yeah.
Because it was much more difficult. Everybody gives Tom Mangelson a hard time because you walk into his gallery and some of the shots, when you look at them close up, they're real noisy, and like the fishing bear, where he was the first one to get the image of the fish, the salmon, like right in the mouth of the brown bear before it clamped down on it. First person to ever do that, but he did it with film. And people give him a hard time. Well, I can get that shot any day of the week. All you got to do is, well, now you can.
Yeah.
But back when, number one, you could only have 200 speed film, which is equivalent to shooting at 200 ISO on a digital camera. Two, you get up there and you can get instant feedback because you can review the image on the back of your camera. You know when you got it.
Make some little adjustments.
Yeah, you can take 10,000 of them, right?
Yeah,
so he goes up there and he's got 36 exposures to get it right.
Wow.
And he's not going to know what he has for a month.
Yeah.
Because by the time he gets back down out of there,
you got to pull it out.
You don't know that you got the shot. You might think that you got the shot, but you don't know it.
Yeah.
And now we have autofocus, which makes everything easier.
Eye tracking autofocus.
Yeah. So it's not even comparable. The degree of difficulty doing things back then to now.
It does. It makes you really think about, like, because, growing up when I was a kid in the 80s, and then some National Geographic or Mutual of Omaha was the big thing that I used to watch when I was a kid,
me too. Yep.
And to see what those guys were capturing and what they were using, when you put that in perspective with what is out there now and what everybody's just carrying around in their pocket, and what everybody can do and what people complain about with these things, when it's pretty amazing what some of those guys were able to really do and capture.
Yeah, you go out there with a red camera now, you can crop in 4 times.
Wow, that's incredible.
So you can film the same scene all day long. And
with
it looks
built-in-
like you're doing it with 4 different cameras.
Yeah, with, built-in ND filters and,
Mm-hmm.
Being able to shoot things in RAW and being able to just go in and manipulate
Right.
anything and everything about that. Yeah, in some ways it's like, wow, that's awesome, and it's made it so that it's so accessible. But I feel like in some ways it's like, oh, it's made it so accessible that it's almost cheapened the value of the people who really,
Not almost. It has definitely.
cheapened the value of the craft.
Yep. Because now, honestly, and we just talked about this on the photographer mindset, it's basically allowed everyone access to the same world. You don't have to be the guy that sits out there for 10 years waiting for a shot. Now you can go out there on one weekend and nail it.
Yeah.
But it's the body of work now that separates people, I think.
I'm a little nervous about what AI is able to do with imagery now, because you're not going to have to go sit out in the cold.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to get super hard to tell if somebody put in that time and that effort and went to that remote place.
Yeah.
And
I know there's a lot of lawsuits right now because AI, like Adobe, for instance, used images that photographers had loaded into their Lightroom library to train their AI. And so there's a lot of lawsuits out there right now about copyright violations based on training the AI, but I don't know how you would ever prove that.
yeah, it's getting tough.
Yeah. And, AI is definitely not caught up to reality at this point, but it won't take long.
Yeah, it's going so fast. I think it's going way faster than what everybody was thinking it would be able to.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why, kind of going back to your initial question or your last question, I like the digital aspect because it does make it a little bit easier
Yeah.
than film.
And I do too.
Film's
Yeah.
a challenge, but then going back one step further, I think that's why it's more important for me to try to sell the experience to people
Mm-hmm.
than it is to sell the image.
Yeah.
I get the images to advertise the experience and kind of let people see where I've been able to be and what I've been able to experience myself. But I think taking people out into the field and letting them experience it for themselves, I think, is what most folks want.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with you. I do. I think too, just the branding, your personal branding is going to become so important as so many options of AI come forward. Be able to trust brands and trust people that go out and go do it, versus just any images that you come across. I think knowing who's behind this work and is going to become even more and more important and more valuable to people. Yeah. And I think too, I because I've seen some of the like photographers and videographers that I watch on like YouTube, and I've learned from over the years on how they're all of a sudden just diving way into film because this world of the digital world has just gotten so easy for everybody. They're like, well, the only way I can now even separate myself now is to challenge myself and to go back to this and put my brand on that, and so I get it, and I'm wondering how that is all going to play out. How is this phase gonna play out?
Yeah, that's a solid question.
Yeah.
I think it's one that we all have, and I think slipping into the video side of things is another challenge completely because you can get good clips, but can you tell a story?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
the difference.
That's the difference. It is.
Yes, it is.
That's why somebody still has Churchill from a year ago on their computer that's not been uploaded because I'm trying to tell that story.
It's not just can you tell a story, but can you make time to tell that story?
Can you make time?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, Ron, and I would consider you a professional where I'm pretty amateur still, I think. But
stop it.
It's like, for me, and it's this whole social media thing, and this is kind of related but not, but like, so I get an elk video from 2 years ago almost has 100,000 views, and then you get all excited. You're like, oh, I must be getting to that point where I'm getting to be a good storyteller, and then you put one up and it gets like 800. You're like, maybe not. So how do you, as a professional deal with, I guess, the influence that social media has on your work?
I don't
regarding
care.
that. You don't care at all?
I could give a crap.
Do you?
If you look at, so let's just say Erin Rainey,
Mm-hmm.
for instance. She's a cinematographer. She works for everybody that you could ever imagine working with or for. I think her social media is she probably has 3,000 followers or something on Instagram. She might have more now because she's getting pretty big. And then there's a couple guys and gals that kind of work the same way. They work BBC, they work for Disney, they have zero social media presence.
No.
And I think, you, in a sense, it's who you know to get started and get in, or the circumstance. So the guy that we're going to see this afternoon, Craig. Mm-hmm. So I worked on a BBC project for Swift Fox, and Craig is a phenomenal Swift Fox photographer. He's a biologist, so he knows where they're at. He's just got some crazy stuff. He's got everything. The silhouettes, the kits playing, he's got it all. And so he was the first one contacted, but he didn't want to give up his locations because they were doing some reintroductions and he didn't want people to know where they were at. And so he told them about me, and that's how he and I met, is just commenting on each other's images. He told them about me, they contacted me, and I had a spot that, I wasn't going to give up any other locations, but this one we could certainly go down and make a documentary out of. And we did. It was successful, but in a sense, they never would have contacted me if they hadn't contacted Craig first, and having known that I enjoyed the same thing and had the same opportunities. So in a sense, that initial contact is who you know. I don't think social media played any part in it, except that that's where the two of us met. Mm-hmm. But I don't put a lot of weight in social media for anything. I don't know that outside of that relationship I've ever made a dime off of people that just knew me from Instagram. It's mostly locally, like yourself. You sell a lot around the area because of who you are. You're a local photographer. Right. So, yeah. And then conversely, there's people making money off social media. So I guess, there's that as well. But I think the brands want younger people. They want females. They want
boobs.
I didn't say that.
But it's true.
They just want a little bit more diverse crowd.
No.
I think
it's like the beer. They want the beer commercials of the 90s.
Yes, there you go.
Well, yeah, swimsuit edition.
Yeah.
But like with Erin, she's worked hard to avoid that kind of stereotype.
Yeah.
She just bases it all on her work. And
I think that's key, to not care about whether that thing has 100,000 views or 800 views, because it can bog you down and overwhelm you. Like, oh, I now have to do something that can top that or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I think we can all get, fall victim to that, of like trying to outdo, like, and you can't control these algorithms. You can't control anything about that. You put a ton of time. I put a ton of time into some projects, and I'm like, this is so great. People are going to love this. And then, whatever, and it does nothing, but it's not that's not a judge of what the quality was of that. Mm-hmm. Not all the time. Sometimes it is. Sometimes something you think you got all romantically attached to something, but it's not that good, and
yeah.
So you can't get caught up in all of that. And it's hard for people. I think it's hard for people to separate from that, but I think that's great that you're comfortable with that. It's obvious that you're comfortable with that, mm-hmm. I don't care. I'm going to do...
It's obvious because I don't have a social media presence. Is that what you're saying, Milo?
No, I don't. No, I'm saying it's obvious because of your reaction to his question when you said, I don't care. That was just very
Yeah.
That was very honest. But that's what keeps the work also honest, because it can affect what you're putting out when you're chasing what you think the algorithm wants or what you think people want.
Yeah.
You just have to do your best and challenge yourself. And
Yeah.
keep that mind frame, and then the rest of that, I feel, is going to follow. Like, keep putting out you be pure and do what you love doing. The rest of that will follow. If that's what you're wanting to have happen, that's the rest of that'll happen. But
I know there's almost 1 billion people that know who Drew Hamilton is.
Yeah.
But they don't know Drew Hamilton.
Yeah.
Drew is our guide one of our guides up in Churchill. He's been an Alaskan brown bear guide forever. They know Drew Hamilton because he's the one that filmed the bear that came and sat down next to the group of photographers. And that thing has got close on all platforms, across everywhere. It's got close to 1 billion views.
It's just hard to wrap your head around.
It is. And then Mike Morrow then throws this video up that was filmed in like 320. So 4K is 4,000. This thing's filmed 320, long time ago. Got a brown bear, inland grizzly up in Denali National Park. One sibling went by and knocked this traffic cone over. That part's not on the video. He has that, but he didn't put that out. And he didn't even license it because he didn't think it was going to amount to anything because it was filmed in such low resolution. Mm-hmm. So the next cub comes around the corner on this, walking down the road, picks the traffic cone back up and slides it back over where it was initially.
I've seen that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So you never know. And he didn't even license it. Put it up thinking, oh, this is a cool clip. And it went nuts.
Oh, yeah.
Licensed it after the fact. So I think he's made a little bit of money on it probably now. But you don't know what's going to resonate with people.
Yeah.
You don't. And I'm sure we've all been in situations where...
It's such a fascinating little moment for its simplicity.
Yeah. Kind of humanizes the bear at that moment. But
yeah.
Yeah.
And that was shot in 320?
Uh-huh.
That's funny.
And so you don't think you're ever going to do anything with it, and then all of a sudden...
Yeah. That's another testament to how sometimes it doesn't matter what the equipment was. It's the storytelling. That's what's amazing about that moment. It's that, even though that's just a moment, it's the story of that you're fascinated with.
Most of us would not. You're looking at a bear's butt because it was walking away from him on a road.
Yeah.
So it doesn't look natural at all. But he kept filming it.
Yeah.
And then gets that.
Because it walks by it and then just stops for a second.
Yep.
And it's like, well, let me fix that.
I'm gonna fix that. I'm gonna take care of you.
And like, in a way, we all can relate with that. And that's what I mean by the story of that. Like, that's, I don't know. It is a fascinating little moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I guess, the reason I asked that question is because, I think it's human nature to like enjoy that kind of gratification.
Yeah.
And I do catch myself. I'm like,
we all do.
Not
Ron, but I do.
Yeah. I catch myself. I'm like, oh, I put a lot of work and effort into that, and I thought it was awesome, and nobody else thinks it's awesome. But then, I get, I come back down to reality, and I'm like, oh, but I really did that for me. It wasn't for the likes or the views or whatever. That was a moment that I enjoyed, and that's why I put the time and effort to make that little video or whatever it is. But I struggle with that once in a while.
Yeah.
So
and I don't think it's fair to say that I don't care about response. You always want people to respond to it, but I guess it's more accurate to say that I don't think it makes a difference as far as your success as a professional. Somebody might see something on social media, but they don't really care who it resonates with as much as they care about the product that you're putting out there.
Yeah.
But I just don't put a lot of time into social media. I have too many other things to keep me occupied, and they're going to make me a lot more money than social media ever will. So that's where I try to put forth the effort. Wow.
So what upcoming? So you you're going to be going back up to Churchill. You've got Alaska. What else? Is there anything else that you kind of got coming up?
23rd of October this year, I'm going to go to Brazil to the Pantanal, which is basically a big swamp.
Wow.
For jaguars. And
man.
We're promised. As a guide, I would never guarantee anything.
Right.
This guy,
he's guaranteeing
jaguars and guaranteeing that he basically all but guaranteed we'd see one on a hunt.
Wow.
And that's the last thing I would ever say because you just have to be there at that moment. And yeah, I would never, ever guarantee somebody.
So we'll see what he can deliver in jaguars.
So, yeah. Yeah, his tip depends on it.
Yeah.
So.
Dude, I think that's the hardest thing going on some of these trips is what do you tip? It's hard for me to tip. You know, I mean, it's not hard for me to tip, but it's like, how do you judge? Because as somebody who loves wildlife, I understand that there's only so much you can do. Now, if you've put in the time as a guide and you know the behaviors and you know, I mean, certain animals, you're invested in this niche. But at the same time, there's only so much you can do. There's only so much you can learn to the point to where they're still animals. They're still wild. They're, you know, I mean, I could watch the same elk. Okay, so there's that elk that hangs out in Mammoth all the time. He's been there, this is year 7, this bull, and he's pretty regular. He'll go over to the terraces in the morning. He'll bugle. He'll push some cows around on the terraces, and then he goes over and camps out by the hotel. Then he goes down by the courthouse. Then he goes across the road over in there. I mean, it's kind of his little thing. But the day that you're there and going to set up right here at the terrace because you want to get the sunrise bouncing off the terrace and get the elk bugling with his breath, you know, seeing with the terrace behind it, he's not there. You know, so I mean, when you're tipping on one of these trips, you're like, man, you know, I mean, where do you tip? It's to me, that's one of the hardest things of going on these trips, you know.
And this one, they gave us a list because there's so many different aspects. So we fly into Sao Paulo, and then we take another flight, a smaller flight, down to the area where we're going to take off from and jump on these boats. And so there's a guy that meets you in Sao Paulo and basically walks you through. He's an English-speaking guy and walk you through customs, make everything easy. So you got to tip him. And then there's the person that picks you up in the airport at the final destination and take you to your hotel, and you got to tip them. So they send a list of, okay, this is recommended for everything.
Wow. Pressure.
It's a breakdown. So I got to take $25 bills and 15 tens, and you know, it's crazy. But
wow, I went to Korea last year, and they're offended if you tip them. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's I think the tipping culture in the U.S. has gone crazy.
It has.
I mean, if I'm at Subway and
you put an online order in on an app, and what's your tip?
To tip? And the minimum is what, 15% or something like that.
Yeah, it's just crazy. I'm like, what am I tipping for? Are you not paying these people?
I don't know.
Exactly.
I know, it's tough. But then you're like, if I don't tip, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Like, what's going to happen to my sandwich? Is it not going to get
Is anybody going to show up next time? What?
Yeah. I don't know. So,
yep.
Is there, because I don't know everything, but I know that you have been around a lot of places. You've had a lot of great experiences. Is there like one country, or is there an experience or an animal that you haven't had that you're looking forward to getting?
Africa.
Africa?
I would like to get to Africa. I mean, I got invited on the same trip that Cole went on. Probably should have gone if I'd have known the way the world was going to end up, or my world was going to end up this year. Probably should have just gone. But Africa is one place that I really want to go, just because of the Mutual of Omaha days, you know.
Yeah.
Sitting back watching those documentaries when I was a kid, and
those were the greatest.
And David Attenborough. More than anything, I want my stuff narrated by David Attenborough, and I'm probably running out of time.
Hey, you're not, because
for that to happen, but
I have an AI website that I can. You just tell me what you want David to say.
We can make that happen. I was kind of hoping the Swift Fox thing would turn out that way, but it was different
Yeah.
British dude.
But still, when a British dude is narrating your stuff, you've made
Yeah.
it.
You've hit it.
You hit it when any British dude
I
is
know.
narrating your footage.
Why is that? Isn't that
You
funny?
know, it's
Anytime,
hilarious.
yeah. And anytime in
Although-
like a movie or anything, like there's ever like a godlike figure that appears, they always have a British accent.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even Zeus in the Greek mythology is British.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
So-
definitely.
But I don't know though, because I listened to that.
An East LA accent probably just wouldn't like
Oh, that would be awesome though. Have you ever listened
like
to
a
Snoop
Cheech
Dogg?
and Chong or
Planet Earth?
I haven't.
Look it up.
Ah,
It will make your day. Snoop Dogg is awesome. But Matthew McConaughey did the Texas one. What was
Yeah.
that called?
Oh, and he's got a good voice for that.
He does. Yeah.
But wouldn't
And-
that be great to have like a Cheech and Chong narration of your?
Dude, I'm telling you, Snoop Dogg is legit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I have seen something or I've heard something
Yeah.
with Snoop Dogg's
I
narration.
don't know how many there are, but
Yeah. Yes.
he
I
knows.
have.
The dude knows nothing about nature
It's so funny.
at all.
So funny, and,
But
and it's
it's
just his
hilarious.
reaction.
Yeah.
And yes.
Yeah. Now we're kind of going in the weeds here, but he's a huge hockey fan. Have you ever heard him talk about hockey?
No.
Yeah, Snoop is a huge hockey guy,
Wow.
which is cool because I
Yeah.
love hockey. But
Yeah.
yeah, he's super knowledgeable about hockey. He's like invested in a bunch of peewee teams for hockey, like he does for football, and
Wow.
he's a big hockey guy.
He's a funny guy. He's an interesting guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And his relationship with Martha Stewart
It's
is
fascinating.
probably the
Yeah.
craziest thing I've ever
You
seen.
know, that's just a guy though who loves life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah. Now, I'm sure he's been through some seasons, but at least we don't ever know what somebody goes through, whatever. But he legitimately looks like, hey man, I just enjoy life. I'm having a good time.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, along that lines with Milo, what has been your favorite place up to this point?
I mean, of course, I love home, but Alaska, you just never know what you're going to be able to see or do in Alaska.
Yeah.
And everywhere you look is a landscape image waiting to happen.
yeah,
I think Alaska's probably my favorite. Although I'm very much looking forward to South America. I think I would go back to Alaska 1,000 times.
yeah. I've never made it to Alaska.
I've got it on the
need to.
books for 2026.
Yeah, I
Maybe
need to get up there.
2025. We kind of got preliminary approval from the boss.
Yeah. This morning.
I have a son in the Coast Guard,
Oh,
and I hope he's.
get stationed up there.
Yes, I hope he
somewhere.
gets stationed
Yeah.
up there. He just started with the Coast Guard in the last year or two, and
I was honestly secretly hoping that my son would join the Coast Guard.
Really?
but
so when I was younger, I just didn't even think about the Coast Guard, and now I think about the Coast Guard, and I'm like, the Coast Guard's actually really cool.
I didn't either when I joined the military.
Yeah.
And same thing for me. I was like, why didn't I look at the Coast Guard?
I
Yeah.
had an opportunity to play football at the Coast Guard Academy. They were like division NAIA, I think.
Yeah.
It's not like the other academies, but I had an opportunity to play football there, and that's certainly one of the decisions in life
Yeah.
that maybe I would have made differently, but I can't say that I would change it because that affects a lot of
Yeah.
different things, but I wish I would have looked harder at
Right.
it for sure.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. Like, I guess back in the day, maybe the Coast Guard just, I don't know, when you're at that age, you're thinking that's just not that cool or
No.
something. I don't
But
know.
then, you look at what the Coast Guard
And you
actually
want to travel.
does.
You travel.
Yeah.
You're like, I want to go around the world, But then,
But all of my high school friends that joined the Coast Guard retired with the Coast Guard, and you look at other military branches, most of them were 4 and done.
yeah,
I did
was.
5.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did 4 regular Army. I did 2 in the Nevada National Guard, and
Yeah.
but he's gonna be a lifer now. But
Coast Guard, yeah, those guys all retire with the Coast Guard.
yeah,
Does his Army time transfer over?
it does.
Does it?
Yeah, it does.
And he's
So-
flying helicopters too for the Coast Guard.
Yes,
Yeah.
which he's excited about because he was at that level now where his flying time was down to nothing, and he just was starting to, he was at that level where now he's more in the leadership roles and dealing with, soldiers and problems, and now he can just fly, and he's really happy about that there's a mission, and that he's not out just, okay, we're doing another training flight, and he really enjoys the fact that, we have a mission now of going and plucking people off a boat or whatever the thing is. They're going to work to do something that day and make a difference, versus, okay, we're going to go through the motions again today, and there's going to be a ton of red tape about it, and bureaucracy and paperwork. And he's really enjoying that. There's a whole different mind frame with the Coast Guard versus there was with the Army. He's really surprised at that and really enjoying that. He's like, he had done 8 years in the Army. I don't think he could have kept going or stayed in, but this transfer now over to the Coast Guard, it's reinvigorated him, I think.
He's got to be pretty unique. I don't know how many West Pointers ended up in the Coast Guard.
I don't know.
True.
So I went.
Yeah, I don't know.
He could be West Point famous for being a West Pointer in the Coast Guard.
I don't know how many guys transfer over.
You have to ask Andre. That'd be a question to find out.
I'll ask him that. But but he's at so his first duty assignment is Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and so he's at the North Atlantic, and they don't send you right off the bat to Alaska, but I think how it works is once you have some experience in the North Atlantic, they only send guys with experience to Alaska. So anyway,
as pilots,
yes, as pilots. Yep. So I hearing about his experiences there, and honestly, just the morale level and the attitude of the guys there, it's just all different. It's much smaller, and everybody, it's just a whole different thing. And so I'm like, wow, I didn't think about that when I went in the Army. I didn't either. But he's really enjoying the Coast Guard. He's really about the mission. It's funny. He's just really excited about that. That, hey, like, because you know how you're younger and you're like, hey, well, I want to go learn the tactical stuff or get involved in some kind of action. And he had the ability, like when he was transferring, there were several guys they needed this many positions filled. There was like 8 guys, and there was like, here's the 8 positions that are going to be available, and you can select and put in your preferences. He actually got his first preference, which that's never happened for him. And so, but one of those also was doing tactical stuff down in Jacksonville, Florida. No interest in that. I mean, it's literally,
right,
flying around snipers, shooting at cartel people, smuggling drugs. It's a lot of all of that type of stuff. He's just not interested in all the tactical stuff. He's just like, he really wanted to be a part of search and rescue and making a difference in people's lives that way. So which I thought was great. That's where I'm like, oh, he has a defined vision of what he's wanting to do, and he gets to do that. And there's nothing better than that. So.
I think the other thing about the Coast Guard is every duty station is a destination for people.
Yeah, it's a cool place.
You're going to live in a destination.
Yeah, none of the choices were bad that he had. I was just like, wow, these are all neat places. Oh, one of them was San Francisco.
No.
And I was like, dude.
Although, great white sharks right off.
There are great white sharks. And there's some cool shorebirds along the California coast. A lot of shorebirds that I haven't gotten yet.
Thule elk, bobcats.
Thule elk, yeah. That's a wildlife area that people overlook, are the birds. Just throwing that out there. When you go on these trips, everybody wants the polar bears and the lions, and the Africa trip was, there were so many birds, and a couple of us, myself and Amy, wanted to shoot these birds, and we're like, hey, there's a really cool, we just drive by and go to the next elephant. But what about this red bird right here? So some of those are hard when you're a huge bird photographer, and you don't get to stop.
I don't know why, but they don't.
That's what I didn't. I was like, I'm not tipping Drew because we didn't stop at that bird.
Yeah,
when I was in Africa. Like, I asked to stop and you just drove by. No tip for you. No, I'm just joking.
There you go, Drew.
Yep.
Now you know.
Yeah. No. And he told me, like, we're 2 weeks in, and he's like, yeah, I did take a couple, like, 3 years ago, and all we did were birds. I'm like, oh, so you know that, dude, people take pictures of birds. Like, he was giving me so much shit the entire week, 2 weeks. But, I mean, I did get some pretty cool pictures of birds.
Yeah.
And then he got one, and he got some freaking golden plovers in Churchill this last time up there, and I was super jealous of those with the colorful tundra.
Yeah, they were on just a red carpet of tundra.
It's so cool.
Crazy.
Do you have anybody that I guess I know you've met a lot of people and they've all been a lot of influence, but as I guess would you say is there anybody that's creatively kind of an influence then for you?
Yeah, the guy that I did my mentorship with, John Timmis, he's a photographer out in New York. Did a lot of film work, a long time ago. John had a big influence on me. So I grew up in an environment where my dad was a coached every sport that I was in almost, but he was kind of a hard ass. Sometimes he was still my dad, but
yeah,
he would push, and so I kind of enjoyed that, and most people don't. So John, being a New Yorker, was a pushy by nature. Yeah, and if he liked what you did, he'd tell you, and if he didn't, he'd tell you. And I kind of enjoyed that. And so John had a big impact on me. In the same way, Charles Glatzer probably is a big influence on me because he is just so technical, just a smart dude, and has the ability. There's a lot of technical and smart people out there, but they don't necessarily have the ability to teach that and transfer that knowledge into someone else. And I think that is what separates Glatzer, is his ability to teach.
Yeah.
He's just a very good teacher, and I've never met anyone better, actually, at teaching technical photography and making it seem like just we're having a fun, nice, easy conversation. But you just get it. The light comes on. Other than that, I mean, there's so many people out there that are great photographers that most people would never hear about, but they have, they definitely have some influence on me.
Yeah.
And I try to surround myself with people like that, people that I enjoy seeing their stuff and
so important
can emulate, and
to get where you want to go, to surround yourself with the people who are on that same path or who have been there or there. It's so important. Yeah.
Right now there's so many young people that are so good. Isaac Spots down in Jackson, he challenges you because he's just passionate. He's always out there. I could name probably 100, but
yeah,
we'd be here for a while. But the younger crowd, Sergius Hennon, we were just up in Churchill with him. He was working for Manitoba Tourism and doing a project for them, and that kid is phenomenal. He's good, and he just gets after it.
Wow.
Savannah in Jackson, she's out there doing the camera trapping. Jake in Jackson, out there with the camera trapping. He's very good at his craft.
And what do you mean by camera trapping?
So camera trapping is a little bit different. So most people think it's just a trail camera sitting out there, but it's actually, you're basically pre-envisioning the scene.
You're composing
a scene, leaving your camera out there. You've got additional battery, and then you've got these lasers basically that are tripped. So when an animal does present itself in the scene, trips the trigger, where it's a motion trigger or a proximity trigger, it'll trip the shutter, and you're capturing whatever image is there.
Okay. So it's actually kind of important where you're putting those trips, because it's not just where you're pointing.
It's not kind of important. It's science. But
right. That's what I'm saying, is that it's not, like you say, the difference between a trail cam is like, okay, it's going to come down this trail, but you're really trying to more of a composing a shot with all of the layers of the background and
or video. Like Jake does a lot of video with it. And they had, in that America the Beautiful, they had some mountain lion stuff in the Grand Canyon. All of it was camera trapped.
Wow.
And so I think that is because not only do you have to compose it properly, you have to expose it properly and predict when they're going to be there, what time of day, where is the sun going to be.
Wow.
All those variables can make or break the shot. But it is, you're putting your whatever mirrorless camera in a box with a battery connected to all these triggers. Some of them are, like if you set up on a carcass, you've got to put flash, and your flash has to be set to where it's going to properly expose your subject. And so all these things have to be pre-envisioned, and that's what makes camera trapping such a science, I think. And somebody's got to have a different mind to be able to create that.
Yeah.
It's definitely putting all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
When you're camera trapping.
In a sense, yeah, you're putting your eggs in one basket, but on the other hand, your camera's working when you aren't. So you can be home sleeping and your camera's doing all the work for you, but you've set it up and
right. Put a lot of thought into that.
So, yeah.
Cool. This is a great spot to stop and take a pee.
So camera trapping brings me to another thing, and this is probably like for you guys, it's not a big deal. I'm just saying that things like this that I think most people don't realize, that it's not just sneaking around out in the bushes and waiting for an animal to come walking by. When Cole was showing me some of his photos from Churchill, I'm like, how did you get like that lit? Like, how is this building, like, how do you have such good lighting all the way across this thing? What time of day was this? And he was like, oh, well, we what'd you call it? You lit the building?
Light painting when we were shooting the Aurora in town.
Yeah, and he's like, oh, well, we just, we just light painted that building. I'm like, what is that? Like, and then I feel like I'm a moron, and I'm like, I'm a very low level amateur with a camera, and I dabble in video, but I did, I didn't think about that, oh yeah, you guys are out there not just composing scenes, but you're figuring out how to light it best or how to do all this kind of stuff. And that's the thing I don't think a lot of people really realize.
Yeah, I think
some of the skill
with most wildlife
techniques,
you work with the light as much as you work with the animals. So you want the behavior to happen, but you also want to put yourself in a position where the light is going to enhance the behavior, enhance the subject. Craig actually sent us an image this morning that, it just, he had a bull elk walking out into this light, but then he exposed it such that everything else was just black. And it was a beautiful image. And the subject is just popped out of the scene, and that gives it a little bit of dimension, but it also, isolates the subject.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes it look surreal. But I think working with light is, you learn to work with the subject first, and then learn to basically manipulate your camera such that you can enhance the light that's available. I was showing Cole some of the unique stuff that we were able to get up in Churchill. I was able to use the same technique on a polar bear this year, because it was in this group of rocks, and most of the rocks were in shadow. The bear poked its head out into this, ray of sunlight that's coming through the rocks. And so you're able to do the same thing. And then working with backlit bears up there, or backlit elk, or whatever. And so you get this rim light, basically you call it. As the sun gets at a certain angle, it lights up all of the hair fibers all the way around the animal, and then the rest of the animal's kind of in shadow. So you get this rim light effect.
Wow.
And it's just something different.
Yeah.
You asked about making your work stand out, and I think that your use of light probably is the best way that you can do that now in the digital age. And
Yeah.
But you're right, with AI, people can create that effect.
Yeah.
But to get it in camera, I think, and most of these big competitions, like the photographer of the year, or the bird photographer of the year, or whatever the big competitions are, they require you to send in your raw image, as well as your edited image, because you're only allowed to crop in a certain amount. You're only allowed to do certain things.
Okay.
You can't add to or remove anything.
That makes sense
from
because
the image.
it's so easy now to manipulate things to
But you can still cheat.
Yeah.
So I think 2 years ago, the guy that won the Photographer of the Year image, so it was a aardvark on this termite mound while the termites were bioluminescent. So they would, when they fly off and leave the mound, they have this bioluminescence. They look like a firefly, basically. And so you've got all these termites flying off, plus you've got this anteater coming up to the mound. Well, they found out that the anteater was actually from a visitor center. It was a piece of taxidermy art. It was a life-size, full-body mount.
And he staged it?
He staged it. Yep.
That's crazy.
And they found that out because the rim light, basically, that was on the aardvark perfectly matched this one that was mounted in this park office. And people recognized it, and boom, it was investigated, and he was stripped of his title, and people still cheat.
That's so crazy to me.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. That's just mind-boggling to me. I'm like, dude, what do you get out of that? You get photographer that, like, inside that you're a fraud. Like,
some people don't care.
No, it's like the same guys same guys that'll shoot that, I think, 190, 200-inch mule deer on that side of the fence where they A, don't have permission, or B, it's not in that unit. And then they still shoot it. They figure out a way to get it, and they put it up on the wall or whatever. But they know every time they look at that mount that it's a fraud. It's not
I think it's almost like I try to wrap my head around this a lot. And I'm like, is it just a gamification of things? Is it just like, it's just the game to you? Like, is it just like, like that, staging that?
Yeah.
When you're in it, it's not that.
It's a game, and it still feeds the ego.
Yeah.
Because you still have the title, right? Or you still have the trophy.
Yeah, but it's in a craft of people that it's a craft. That's my point. And you're totally missing the whole point here of the craft.
I guess it would be similar to baiting an animal. And this is crazy to me because in Europe, it's celebrated and expected that the animal was baited, because almost all of them are. It's crazy. And then if you do the same thing in the U.S., you get chastised for it.
Yeah.
Or in North America, anywhere. But it's common practice in Europe to bait wildlife for the purpose of taking images.
Wow.
So it's a different mindset. In matter of fact, I just talked about this also, that there's a gal that's young gal that's basically the face of Canon in their R7 series, and she baits squirrels all the time. And that's how she kind of got started.
But in their mind frame, it's like, it's just what you do. That's not
perfectly acceptable.
Like, right.
Yeah.
And so so it's kind of hard to say, oh, that's a fraudulent way of doing something, of catching a natural moment, when they're looking at it like that's just what you do. It's utility.
And in the U.S.,
it's efficient.
Same scenario. There's a gal that's made her name by throwing other photographers under the bus because of this unethical behavior of baiting animals and these different things, where in Europe it's celebrated. Here, exactly the converse. Made their name for exposing all these unethical wildlife photographers, and not that great of a photographer themselves, or nothing that basically stands out, but made the name by exposing the truth.
Yeah.
And I find it weird, but in the bird world, nobody bats an eye if you're taking a picture of a rare species on a bird feeder.
On a feeder, yeah.
Or a bird in general on a bird feeder. Or, in my case, I have a really nice apple tree that has some really nice perches on it. All my bird feeders are just to the left of it. I can shoot birds on a natural perch on my apple tree, but 15 feet away, there's 3 different feeders. Or, just like my feeders, I have natural wood going across my feeder for perches. So What's worse, but nobody ever says anything with that. In fact, there's contests in bird photography where you have to have a portion of your feeder in the photo.
To prove.
There's actual competitions where there's got to be, an unnatural perch, aka bird feeder or whatever, in the photo with your bird. So, but they don't look at it that way except for owls. If you bait an owl in the United States, you're going to hell for one, and you are shunned in the photography world for the rest of your life, no matter what you do.
Really?
If you bait an owl, in the U.S.
It's crazy. Or Canada. Yeah,
or Canada, or North America.
For a
in general.
photo?
Mm-hmm.
If you bait an owl for a photo?
There's guys that'll put mice on top of the snow. And first of all, it's unnatural because
mice aren't
they're not on top of the snow. They're underneath. They make their living in the tunnels that they create underneath the snow, that kind of thing. They're insulated down there.
And they probably know that they stand out when they're on top of the snow.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But there's people that will do that and justify it by saying they're feeding the owls, but there are just as many people that are, or not just as many, there are far more that think that's unethical, and so they chastise them for it.
That's so interesting. Like, what is the difference, though, between some other kind of a bird and an owl? Why is an owl on a different level?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that people will say is that owls fly really low. So if you do this in an area that's close to a highway, they come in low. They're putting themselves at risk, and so you're exposing that animal to potentially being run over.
Yeah.
And so I can see that. What I don't understand is the hypocrisy of exactly what Cole was just talking about. Why is it okay for one bird and not okay for another? Why is it okay in Europe? It's not in the U.S. There's just a lot of hypocrisy.
Don't put a mouse out on the snow, but let's go ahead and put some windmill farms over here.
Right.
And,
and that is great because it's green, right?
Yeah.
But it's the same thing with game farms. There's a lot of photographers that make a living shooting on game farms where, they'll have leopards or they'll have wolves or whatever, and they get these, they're not trained per se, but they'll put food here, food there, and, they'll have a really nice backdrop. I think there's photographers that make a living doing nothing but game farm photography, and that's fine. And then there's some people, your quote unquote purists, who shun those kind of people. Mm-hmm. And I look at it as if I never have an opportunity to photograph a snow leopard and there's a game farm where there's snow leopards, personally for myself, I probably would, because I would love to just enjoy some time with a snow leopard.
Yeah. I can see that. I can see that. Like, you want to shoot it for the beauty of it.
Yeah.
So, but I guess it comes down to what are people representing? How are people representing?
I would never tell somebody.
It does come down.
Yeah. I would never tell somebody that I went to, everybody knows I went to Nepal, but I didn't see any snow leopards, and I wouldn't try to represent a picture of a Himalayan, the Himalayas and a snow leopard if I was at a game farm in Kalispell.
Yeah.
I'd be like, yeah, this was shot at this so-and-so place, but I don't know. It is all about representation.
But it's unethical to go to a game farm, but it's perfectly acceptable for people to go to a zoo and photograph the same animal at a zoo.
Yep.
Because they're not being manipulated for the purposes of a photograph. They're just in the zoo. So it's crazy. There's a lot of hypocrisy in wildlife.
That's so interesting. This is stuff I've never even thought of. This is interesting. All these unwritten. A lot of these are just unwritten, right? These are
I'd love to not think about it either, but it's out there.
Okay. It's unwritten, I don't know what it is, but these rules or
it's even getting to the point now when you talk to people that are looking at Yellowstone is, oh, you got that in Yellowstone. You're like, oh.
Well, they're not trained.
They're not trained in Yellowstone too.
They're not baited. They're not trained.
They're not fenced.
Living their lives. They're unfenced.
Yeah.
They cross the road or cross the wrong point in the topography. Now they're a game animal. They're not.
Yeah. And it's the same with the fishing bears in Alaska. Mm-hmm. And it's the same with the elk in Rocky Mountain. It's the same with the elk where we're going this afternoon. They go 30 yards either direction where we're going up in the breaks. They're huntable. Mm-hmm. They are huntable. 30 yards. They cross the river. They're fair game. Mm-hmm. Just so happens that there's this 1.5 mile area where they're not hunted, and I mean, animals aren't stupid. You know, they know.
Yeah.
And it gives people an opportunity to witness some of the stuff that
I know
they've never
that
seen.
right where that area is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because I had a tag for there years ago. And they knew right where they needed to be.
Yeah.
And I was like, could you guys just could one of you just step over here for just a moment?
Nope.
And I think a lot of it goes to, and you know, chime in if you think I'm wrong, but I think a lot of it is social media.
No, it's 100% social media.
It is, because
You can grow your presence by throwing people under the
Yep.
bus.
totally,
Yeah.
instead of appreciating the craft, which it is a craft that I will spend the rest of my life trying to perfect. And the cool thing about wildlife photography is you can never perfect it. I think that's one of the big draws for me, is that you'll never perfect this craft. I'll never know every behavior every time for an elk. Never. I mean, there's going to be circumstances where I think I know everything about a certain behavior, and it's going to do something different, and I'm not going to get that shot. So I'll never perfect every behavior, and I'm never going to perfect that shot. That's why I tell you when you're like, oh, that's a Nat Geo worthy shot, and I'm like, yeah, it's like 80% worthy. Because I don't ever want to get to that point where I'm like, that's 100%. That's the perfect image. It was a damn awesome experience, I'll give you that, but I never want to have in my mind the perfect image, because then...
Well, that's like
You know.
the 14-year-old kid that got the what bull,
Yeah.
the score.
Oh, that 437 bull over in southeast Montana?
Right.
Yeah, with his bow? Yeah.
Exactly. So what do you got to look forward to now?
Yeah.
I feel bad. I feel bad for those kids, you know?
You're done, kid. You
Yeah.
don't know it yet, but you're
Yeah,
done.
it doesn't
Yeah.
that doesn't come along again.
I mean, I can't wait to go back to Manitoba for polar bears, because there's so many different images and looks that I want now. And the cool thing is about when you go to a place one time, when you go back, you're way more selective, because you've already got your document photos.
Yeah. So that was why this year I was able to play with the light a little bit more, because I had the images from last year, and this year I could be creative. And it kind of unleashes you the second time you're in an area or photographing a subject, is you've got some images now. Now it kind of unleashes the creativity, and you can open up all the tools in the toolbox.
Yeah.
Instead of just focusing on getting an image. So
It's a good
we
way
had
to...
a great year last year.
Yeah.
And so it did unleash us this year, unleash me to be a little bit more selective, number one, and more creative, number two.
Wow.
So you can never go to a place just once. That's what I've learned in this endeavor, in this passion, is you can't go to one place just one time.
Yeah.
So I already have to go back to Africa.
Yeah.
I'll go when Ron goes. I'll go to Africa with him and go back, so I can... I mean, I took almost 20,000... Between video and photo, I took 20,000 files
Holy
plus on my memory
mackerel.
cards.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just like...
So what's your thought on that then? Because I will go through that. I am really trying to get more selective about what I shoot now, because I find it is so overwhelming to go through the stuff. Like I used to always have more of a mind frame of just keep that camera rolling, because you don't know when you're going to catch that moment. And then I find that, man, I just have so much stuff, and I'm just, do you just should you just keep stuff going, like keep shooting, or should you care about that? Is what I'm trying to say. Like this is I overthink things, right? So this is what I'm saying. I'll overthink it, but I'm like, wow, is there a fine line here of just you're just out there wasting a ton of memory, you're wasting a ton of battery or whatever. You're trying to capture every little thing.
A long time
and you just
where I
got
would have said, no, shoot it all and keep it all.
Yeah.
And now I've filled up a 50 terabyte RAID, and I'm looking at replacing that with a 100 terabyte NAS system, and I'm looking at spending $4,000. So you're, on one hand, memory's cheap. On the other hand, not when you shoot that much.
Yeah.
And it's the video that tears it up.
And that's mainly my thing is the
Yeah.
video. Photos too, I'm trying to get better about that, of like just I don't know. I don't get out so much into. I would love to get into wildlife photography as a hobby, and I'm hoping to do that more and more here very soon. But is there a point for you guys where you're just like, it just gets so overwhelming with all of the shots, and I'm going back through them, and I can't tell a difference between this one to this one to this one to this one.
Yeah, it does, especially now. So I just upgraded to the R5 Mark II for a couple different reasons. One is because it has pre-record, so now I don't need to video for a half hour to get 30 seconds worth of footage, where I did before with the mirrorless, because it didn't have pre-record. Like, even the C70 with Canon has pre-record on it.
Yeah.
Like a 4-second pre-record. The Red camera has 30-second pre-record.
Wow.
So you could totally miss something.
You just got to make sure you have that camera
Hit
pointed in
record.
the right direction.
Yeah.
At least don't be down on the ground.
Right direction, and you're focused, and then hit record, and you got it.
Yeah.
So the R5 Mark II now has a 3 to 5 second pre-record for video, and so it's going to save me actually a lot of memory.
Yeah,
because I don't have to be recording all the time.
That's magic how they do that. I don't know how they're swapping out so much memory that it's recording.
Yeah, it does
all the time.
It does heat the sensor because it is recording all the time. So that's something that you have to be careful of. But at the same time,
it's ditching it at the same time. Magic.
Yeah, it's just empties the buffer as fast as it fills it.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And that will save me a lot of memory with wildlife, because you don't have to have that captured.
Yeah. What NAS system are you looking at, by the way? This is totally side note. I should wait to ask you later, but I don't want to forget.
Well, I might ask you later, because I'm researching several different options. And
okay.
So
I am too.
I've looked at the, Synergy Pro.
Mm-hmm.
That's one that I'm looking at, but it's not cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've looked at probably 50 different systems, and I have not landed on one yet.
On what that? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, either have I. So I've just kind of started my look at that, and but I'm probably not. I'm not going to get as big as yours and everything else, but I do need to get a system, and this is a whole world that because I'm constantly running into these problems now of not having enough space, not having enough external hard drive space, but also being able to edit fast enough,
Right.
So switch into solid state drives and all that kind of stuff, so I can edit and not be lagging so much and things like that. But anyway, that's all shop talk. But so I went down some rabbit holes of those the other day, and I was just like watching videos. I'm like, I'm getting overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so who knows? Maybe if I find something, I'll shoot you a text and say, look at this one.
Do. Please.
Yeah. And I'm doing it for different reasons. We went over that last night. Whatever. But yeah, and for work stuff. I would do it for work stuff too. Yeah. But I have a personal project that we talked about last night that I've been kind of thinking about. Do you think I'm crazy on that? Well,
no.
Okay.
I don't think you're crazy on it.
Okay.
I mean, I do agree with what we talked about with Cody last night. That makes you become a target a little easier, because it won't be long.
As with anything that you have that's valuable.
Right. If shit hits the fan and
food storage or
food storage, ammo.
Really fast, I'll just say it because it's weird that I brought it up right now, but it's just that, did you tell him what we talked about?
No, he was already in bed.
Okay, yeah.
We were late last night.
I feel bad about that. I owe your wife an apology. No, but my thought on that was I was looking at these countries that are like where they're just shutting the internet off, and I just love looking up anything and everything. How do I fix this? How do I fix that? YouTube or whatever is just such a resource that we all just take for granted. Everything's just always there. So anyway, I had this idea where I thought, what if I just had, when I found a video that I'm scrolling or something, it's like if it's something with my car, my truck, my generator, my anything, simple electrical, simple plumbing, simple anything too complex, to gardening, to this or that or anything. If I find a fun, YouTube short that just explains it really quick, why not just screen record it, send it to my NAS, send it to my, because now you can get them and they will your phone, everything can be connected to that. And you can then just say, okay, I need to save this. I'm going to send this to it. And then what I'll do is I'll save it, and I'll just assign some tags to it really quickly. I'll just say, okay, this has to do with this, this, and this. You can go in and edit in the information on it, just like any photo or anything else. Assign some tags to it, send it there. But the reason why I wanted to do an NAS is because I thought, well, for me to start creating my own archive, because I buy books too. I'm like, well, I want to make sure I have a book on this. You know, books you got to transport them. You got to have them wherever they're stored. You've got to be there to go get it. Whatever. And so I just thought, in a situation where the power goes off or the internet's turned off, what if you were able to protect your own archive of just simple how to do anything and everything that we all just have access to right now? Could there be a day where we're all of a sudden and I brought up the Book of Eli, that movie where he's like, hey, we took everything for granted. We didn't know how good we had it, water. We just let the water run, whatever. Anyway, that's my thought about this, about the ease and access now of that. I think someday we're going to be we had all of the world's information at our hands at any time, and we just took that so for granted. So I just thought, well, maybe it's a useless big project or something, but how I figured I thought I would make it not an overwhelming project for myself is if with an NAS, with network attached server, you can buy multiple units so that other people are also on the system. So if maybe my thing is, whatever my thing is, I don't even know what my thing is, but whatever my thing is that I tend to consume, I screen record, and then that's the thing that I just come across. But I have a sister who does tons of quilting and sewing, and I guarantee you the how-to and the tip videos that she's consuming are all different. So what if I had a thing and she had a thing that when she sends it to hers, it sends to mine? And yet my brother-in-law, who's a diesel mechanic, and I know the stuff that he's looking up, whenever he comes across something. So we're all just, through our normal activities of what we do, we just consume what we consume, and we all chip in, and we're all just storing these things that we think is valuable, bite-sized information that would be good to look up at some point. Now the problem is if there's an EMP or there's a whatever, and you've got this cooked hard drive now. My solution to that was have a Faraday bag with an external hard drive that every week or month you just back up to that external hard drive, throw it in there with a little power pack, a solar panel, and something for a screen. If it's an old iPad or whatever, throw that all in there, and you have this little thing that's your own archive of digital information that you can throw in your backpack or throw in a vehicle or whatever. Or if I have all of this and I'm someday we're in a situation where I'm like, gosh, Cole, we don't have any of this, but you seem to have a lot of this. I really wish I could trade with you. Hey, I happen to have a thing, with a card. I could make a copy of all of this information for you. Would that be enough for you to share some food with us or some gas or some diesel? You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
And I just started to look at that as holy cow. And we were watching the news, watching in these countries because they're rioting and protesting, they'll just shut the internet off. And I'm like, if they shut the internet off, I am not going to, remember how to do whatever it was on my dumb truck that I have to look up for some reason. Because that's not what I'm good at. And I can't seem to retain that information. Anyway, but anything I ever bought, now it's the beauty of that is now I go buy something, I watch reviews on everything. I get a new camera. Nobody's reading a manual anymore. You just go through and you watch, there's a video. There's 10 people within seconds.
University of YouTube. You can learn anything you want to learn.
And they'll break down everything about how that thing works and everything else. So store that information digitally, protect it in a Faraday bag, and that could come in very handy in a post-hurricane situation where the power is out. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be post-apocalyptic world. how many people are like, gosh, how do I purify this water? You know, and they don't have any background in those things, but if they don't have power and they can't get on the internet, and Elon's sending Starlink out there, but it's not here yet.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so if you had a little backpack or a little family 72-hour kit, like, yeah, that might be valuable, huh?
Mm-hmm.
What's your thoughts on that? So whoever listened to last night's episode and now tonight's, they got to listen to that whole mess twice. But what's your thoughts on that? Is that crazy?
No, I think it would be advantageous. I think none of us are as prepared as we would need to be.
Yeah.
In that type of event. And I don't even know that kids now know how to use an encyclopedia or use any kind of a manual.
Yeah.
Because they've got access to it at the tip of their fingers. So to provide that access, I do think that
and I do realize
you're going to be on a list.
Oh yeah.
Just having the conversation, but
100%. Yeah. And and
you're on a list just because you're on this podcast. So
this is the thing though, and my wife said, well, why won't you just download it? YouTube allows you to download videos. Why don't you just download them? But I'm like, you can only use that video in YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
You can't transfer that video.
Right.
And if they shut that off, it's off. So or whatever. So that's why I was like, but we can all screen record, assign some of our own searchable tags to it. And I know nothing is foolproof, but it depends on where do you want to put your efforts. Do you want to put your efforts into, because there's some people that are just buying books. Buy books, have books on covering everything. Your house may burn down, and all those efforts and all that money you spent on that could go away. I mean, they're all valuable efforts in one way or another, but they're all vulnerable. So I do realize that. Anyway.
Yep.
Yeah, but when you know what? It could be a simple thing of like, hey, I'm a wildlife photographer. I'm out here in the middle of nowhere. There's no service. And it could be just a little something that I saw a video one time that would help me in this situation or fix this thing or deal with, whatever it may be. And you got that little external hard drive with a little iPad that takes up no space in your bag, and you just can look it up because you keep your entire archive of what your valuable information is to you.
Mark, so another guy from Beyond the Wild podcast. We haven't even touched on that.
No.
But Mark carries his sellable images with him everywhere he goes. And if we are in wherever Alberta photographing bears or elk, we go in to have dinner. That bag goes with him. He never leaves it in the car because it's got his life's work.
So what experience has he had that triggered that?
Yeah. Well,
so he's been in a
car in a hotel car in a hotel parking
yeah,
lot.
He's
car
been
in a hotel parking lot got stolen.
Oh.
And that was just last year.
Yeah.
That wasn't even. But
I was thinking,
having
did he have a
camera
missed
gear
opportunity where he
stolen.
could have sold an image or he could have sold something and he didn't
his
have access
whole
to it?
livelihood was
Yeah.
selling images.
Okay.
And now he's kind of transitioned. He's finally seen the light. He's transitioned a little bit to, doing some tours and trips and sharing those experiences rather than just the images. But Mark's entire livelihood has always been selling images and selling stories that he's written. He's a writer, photographer. That's where he made his money, and he's done well. He's done it for a long, long time, and he's very good at what he does.
Wow.
But carrying those images with him is important.
Yeah, I bet.
In that world. Yep.
Run my idea by him.
why-
Run my idea by him, see what he says.
Yeah, well, it's not a bad idea. But that's why I've looked at doing the NAS, even if it's just if I've got my working drive on the RAID system and then having the NAS where I could access it from anywhere.
Yes.
That's advantageous. So if I put all my finished products over here where I can access them, get them out to someone on request.
Yeah.
That's critical.
It is. Let's get to the Beyond the Wild podcast because I've been wanting to also bring that up too. And your podcast, talk about that experience. And
so it's been a roller coaster. We started out with Wild and Exposed, whereas Michael Morrow and Mark Raycroft. Later on, Mark left for a time. Jason Loftus came on the podcast and as a host. He'd been on as a guest. Jason's a great guy out of Utah. Came on as a host. And then Mark came back later on, and then the life cycle of Wild and Exposed had kind of run its course, and so we started Beyond the Wild. We teamed up with Picture Line Camera in Salt Lake City, Utah. Jens and then Colin Bigelow as the manager. They've been a great partner to us, and so we started Beyond the Wild. We had to rename it. We couldn't buy Wild and Exposed, unfortunately, and just continue with that. Wild and Exposed was kind of the OG wildlife photography podcast, or one of. There's now a plethora of opportunities for people to consume content and hear stories. But I think the biggest thing was just the ability to meet people and talk to some people who are really inspirational for one reason or another. It might not be because they're the best photographer, but just the inspiration that you pull from different life stories, I think.
I would have never had an opportunity to sit down and have a conversation like this with you if we didn't have a thing like this. And that's what I have found is that's what has become incredibly valuable is the inspiring people that you can meet. It gives you an excuse to sit down and talk about these things and be nosy and ask questions.
Exactly.
And
going back to that 6 degrees of separation. The wildlife photography world is actually a pretty small community.
I must be getting a delivery. Is this happening in here?
Yeah. It started a few minutes ago. Go ahead.
Let me just check on this 1 second. I apologize.
You're good.
Maybe somebody broke in and just started stealing stuff.
Cleaning out the closet.
Yeah.
What time do we need to leave? Soon?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go home and load up and take off.
You said 3 hours?
Yeah.
That's not bad.
2.5, 3 hours.
Apologize, my walls are not that soundproof.
Is that outside?
Sound deadening. What's that?
Is that outside?
No, it's right there in the office there.
Oh, okay.
Apologize about that, but I made a note while we were talking right there too. I was like, okay, I made a timestamp so I can take care of that.
Definitely need to take care of that. I apologize.
No sweat. I just put in a timestamp.
They both start with P, and it has happened more than once, and I have to go back and fix it. So
yeah, no sweat. And that's, I guess, one of the other benefits of that we're not live. But
right, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay. So the wildlife photography world is kind of a small community. There's a lot of geographical space, I guess, so to speak. But as far as the number of people who do this seriously, it's really not that large a crowd when you look at photography as a whole. A pretty small percentage, I would say. And so to just give people an opportunity to get to know one another on that platform, I think has been the best part of it. As a result, I've gotten some good opportunities, and I'm nobody from Wyoming. So I've gotten some good opportunities to interact with and build a network of friends and people around that community that have gotten me some images that I never would have expected to be able to get.
Wow.
So I'll take advantage of that as long as I can. And I just enjoy visiting with like-minded people and gleaning whatever I can from wherever I can. We interviewed a guy from Georgia, his family. He's a biologist by education, but it was one of the most fun conversations that I've had, just because the way he's raising his sons in an urban environment. He's raising his sons in the most feral way he probably could, and I think that that's the way I grew up, so it resonates a little bit that way. But if you look up the Ray Family Adventures, I think is I'll have to look up the page and you could put it in show notes.
That's got me interested because it's raising them feral in an urban environment.
Yeah, it's crazy. So they live just on the outskirts of Atlanta. It's one of the busiest cities in the country, But he does like animal removal.
Okay.
So when they get a poisonous snake that gets in somebody's house, he goes, takes it out, or bee infestation, something like that.
Yeah.
But he raises his kids to, kind of be fearless and learn about the animals that he's working with on a daily basis. And his boys are just hilarious. They're young, but they're curious.
Yeah.
And so, and then, in the same way, Cole and I never would have met probably, even though we had the law enforcement background in common. We probably never would have run across each other had it not been for that podcast. And now, we've gone to Churchill together. We've photographed other places together.
Well, now he's going to be asking
this
you.
Afternoon.
Now he's going to be asking you to break dance. I mean, he would have never.
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
yeah.
With the right motivation.
With the right ABV.
I've got to feel it though.
No, I hear you. Yeah, but you know what though? Like it's that kind of a thing though. How, and that's also why I enjoy long form, and I'm glad that people are doing the long form, because you can. There's levels of being comfortable, and you just if you're trying to just fit everything into a 20-minute conversation, you just can't. Make the time to have a good, that's one thing that we're all in a rush nowadays. And so I feel like the long form podcast has been, for me, I don't care if we ever get known for anything or the exposure or whatever, but let's just stop for a while and talk and learn about each other at a completely different level than what people in society are now doing. Everybody's so on the move. Mm-hmm. It gives that opportunity to do that. It's almost as if, I don't know, we're sitting in a room, but it's almost going back to hey, when you would meet up with people, you spent time around a campfire, because that's
exactly, when we started Wild and Exposed, that's exactly the feel we wanted it to have. Is that because when you go out and do these trips, you come back at the end of the day and visit, and you might split up during the day. But when you come back at the end of the day, it's just a sit down and kind of rehash, and, oh man, you remember when this happened, or that was crazy. I can't believe you got that image because I was in the wrong spot for whatever reason, or that kind of thing. And that's kind of the feel we wanted it to have, and that's the feel that we've continued, or style of conversation that we've continued to go with. Keep it light. Life's too short to take it all seriously,
Yeah.
But there are times where we get into some deep subjects and gets a little bit more emotional. But most of the time we try to keep it light and jab and just have fun with it.
Yeah. Wow.
And where can people go to find or Beyond the Wild?
BeyondTheWildPodcast.com. Beyond the Wild was by itself was taken. So BeyondTheWildPodcast.com. You can find it on, any of the podcast platforms.
Yeah.
And then Western Wildlife Images is my website, and you can find it, a link to it on there as well.
And it'll be linked in the description of this one as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was on there, and it was just amazing images on there. It's not just that when you think about it, it's not just an amazing image or an amazing shot of an eagle or anything else. But it's you were there. You had that experience. That's a record of an experience. That's what's, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Sometimes we can just get caught up in oh, that's a cool picture. But you're oh no, somebody was out there. That's an experience. So
Yeah.
Lots of cool experiences. That's what I'm always thinking of when I'm going through like Cole's stuff. We go through some of his portfolio, and I'm just like, look at all these experiences. I'm like, what am I doing Saturday? You know, like,
Yeah.
It's an adventure.
It's fun.
yeah,
And it's something I hope to be doing until I'm in my 90s.
yeah,
So, I mean, I have a lot longer to go to get there than you guys, but
yeah, a lot longer.
As I just told a kid yesterday, I was at a training for work, and I said, I'm more than halfway done with this. And he says, oh, no, don't say that. Don't say that. I said, dude, I'm 53. I'm more than halfway done.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and I think it was Jason that posted something, and we've talked about this before. Jason posted something on Instagram a couple of weeks ago or a month ago, and it was a meme about, you know, like at 42 years old or 40 years old, the male life in North America is essentially half over. And then Jason put something in there about, however old Jason is, we won't say here, but he's like, I only have a certain amount of elk ruts left. I only have a certain amount of babies in the spring left, and I'm going to maximize every one of those. And then when you sit back and look at it like that, you're like, wow, that's a super awesome way to look at things. Is I only get to experience the elk rut for maybe another 40 years of my life, and then I'm done. You know, and so I want to maximize every one of those 40 years and those 40 elk ruts.
And make sure you maximize them with the people that matter.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. Isn't that's a huge one? That's valuing your time in a way where you don't spend it with people that are either toxic or just negative or just not going in the same direction with you. And I think I was talking to one of my kids the other day about that, about like at this age, like value your time. I know you're young and you feel like you got a ton of, got all the time in the world. Don't look at it that way. Value your time.
right.
And don't give it away cheaply.
Yeah.
And experience things, experience moments, experience time with people who are worth, not that people aren't worth it, but you know what I mean, that the people that are like-minded, trying to bring something positive to this world, trying to, whatever. Versus,
They're going to enhance that moment.
Yes.
I guess kind of goes back to Cole's question about social media and why it doesn't necessarily matter as much to me. I got to be with each of my children for their first bear. That's a thing that makes a difference to me. And I got to, this spring I was in Yellowstone, and it was a grizzly bear. It was not in a good spot. It wasn't going to be a good photograph. But I got to have my grandson on my lap when at the exact moment, and I could tell the exact moment that he knew that's a bear. Because I could hear it. He was like, whoa.
Yeah.
He's 2. And I've raised him I'm not going to take credit for that. His mom has allowed me to be with him and share with him, as far as the wildlife is concerned. And so he knows what a bear is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to be with him and have him realize that, hey, I just saw my first grizzly bear.
Wow.
I think.
And to experience that with him.
And experience that with him, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. When people look at, when this reaction videos thing kind of took off, people were like, wow, this is kind of crazy that people are just doing reactions to things. Mm-hmm. But really, life is, I really enjoy, I will watch something, and I'd rather watch it now with somebody else and experience that with them. And I guess that's just the essence of it. And that's the mentality behind that. But yeah, you got to see his reaction at that moment. You shared that moment or that reaction, and I get the whole. It's kind of crazy that's what the world is. We've gone and done that. And now there's people that just sit there and just do reactions and stuff. But right. I get it because you're sharing a moment.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Ron hit the nail on the head. It's about those moments with, it's like my kids. so Ron has met Shasta when we went to Manitoba, but this is the first time that I've got to introduce Ron to my kids, and I'm very proud of the fact that I get to introduce my kids to people like Ron and you. I mean, people that have, that I look up to, and that all the first thing they did, because we're all going to Yellowstone for the weekend, and they all told Ron what kind of camera they have and how we're going to go shoot in Yellowstone this weekend, and I was like, that's kind of a proud dad moment that I get to share that experience with somebody who loves the same things that I do, and here my kids gravitated towards him in 5 minutes, about it,
and to hear I got to laugh because I got to hear him. I came from my battery charger. Dad, you took my battery charger.
Yeah, I didn't take it. They don't put their stuff away like Dad tells them to. But no, but you're right. And seeing that, and like when you and I went to Yellowstone, you got to see your first wolves, and we had that immature bighorn ram that I spent more time watching you than I did watching this ram walk right next to us and stop and look at us, and we're out filming this ram, and then your next thing you know, you're like, my lens is too big, and I'm like, you're using a 24 millimeter. I don't know much closer we want this ram to get. And you were just like awestruck. I mean, it was like, this
ram
cool.
was walked within like 2-3 feet of me. I'm like, I can't get him in frame. Like, he's too close. And I'm like,
yeah, because you were shooting B-roll and using like a 24 or something.
Yeah. And anyway, it was wild.
So,
I'm like,
that's awesome.
And that's why, like I said,
it's one of those moments also where you're like, this is so awesome that I'm this close, but I don't want to be one of those people in a Yellowstone video who was too close. And I'm like trying to evaluate, like, how do I back up? How do I whatever? But he just came in close.
I had to send a camera, and I know we're kind of winding down. I apologize, but I had to send a camera to Canon Professional Services last year, and you always have to put the reason. And I said, got run over by a bighorn sheep. The guy's like, now could you explain that to me? So, well, he was chasing a ewe. She came at me, probably tried to peel him off. I had to leave my camera stuck in the snow, back up. He hit it.
That's probably one of that guy's favorite stories that he tells people.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean,
those are the experiences that that create memories that are lasting, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
We're going to go make one today. We're going to go shoot the elk rat.
We are.
Can't wait.
Yeah, that's exciting. And where you're going, people travel from all over. We're so lucky to be in this area where these things are relatively accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just beautiful places.
But I'm super thankful you came on today.
Yeah. Thank you guys. I really
appreciate
it. It was a good opportunity to.
Yeah. No, it was great. I'm glad I got to meet you.
I know we've talked on the phone.
Yeah. And Cole has told me so much about you.
That's scary to me. I don't know which part's Cole's sharing.
No.
only good parts.
Only positive. I don't know that. Yeah, I don't know that he hasn't even intimated that he has any negative. There,
no.
You're on.
I was
you're on a pedestal.
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah. Well, like you said, there's those. You've got your guy in New York. You got Charles. I mean, you're one of those guys to me, and you have been since the first time I looked at your stuff on Instagram. So,
well, I appreciate
the fact that we get to, now I get to call you a friend is kind of it's a big deal to me. It really is. Mm-hmm. So I really appreciate you coming and hanging out with us. So
yeah,
absolutely.
We'll do it again.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm in whenever.
Awesome.